My wife's father invited me to a business dinner with a Japanese client. I kept quiet and pretended I didn't understand Japanese, but then I heard him say something that made me freeze. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The email arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were always quiet at the office. That dead zone between Monday's chaos and the midweek momentum that carried you through to Friday. I was halfway through a mediocre turkey sandwich when my phone buzzed. And there it was, a message from Richard Chen, my father-in-law, with a subject line that read simply, opportunity. I stared at it for a moment before opening it. Richard and I had what you might call a cordial distance. He was polite at family gatherings, asked surface-level questions about my work as a marketing consultant, nodded thoughtfully when I answered. But there was always something behind his eyes, a calculation, an assessment. Like I was a stock, he was still deciding whether to buy or sell. My wife, Grace, assured me it was just his way. Dad's like that with everyone, she'd say, squeezing my hand. He's a businessman. He compartmentalizes. I loved Grace. God, I loved her. We'd been married 3 years together for 5, and she was the kind of person who made you believe in goodness. She taught 2nd grade, came home with glitter in her hair, and stories about kids who couldn't tie their shoes, but could explain the water cycle. She saw the best in people, including her father. The email was brief. David, I have a business dinner Thursday evening with an important client from Tokyo, Tanaka-san from Hiroshi Industries. He's considering a significant partnership with Chen Dynamics. I think it would be valuable for you to join us. Good exposure for you. And Grace mentioned you've been looking to expand your consulting practice. Matsuri Restaurant 700 p.m. Dress well, Richard. I read it twice, then a third time. Richard had never invited me to anything business related. In his world, I was the guy who married his daughter. Acceptable, educated enough, but fundamentally separate from the empire he'd built. Chen Dynamics was his creation. A mid-sized import-export company that had grown from a single shipping container operation into a multi-million-dollar enterprise connecting American retailers with Asian manufacturers. Richard was proud of it in the way some men are proud of their children, fiercely, possessively, without room for question or critique. And now he wanted me there at a dinner with a potential partner. It felt like being invited to sit at the adults' table for the first time. I should have been grateful. I should have felt honored. Instead, I felt something else, something I couldn't quite name. A whisper of unease. Like the moment before you realize you've forgotten something important. I forwarded the email to Grace with a simple question mark. She responded within minutes, her text message bright with exclamation points. Oh my God, that's amazing. Dad must really trust you. This is huge for him. Hiroshi Industries is like a dream client. You have to go. So I went. Thursday arrived wrapped in that particular kind of autumn cold that makes you wish you'd worn a heavier coat, but too proud to admit it once you're already outside. I'd chosen my best suit, charcoal gray, tailored last year for a friend's wedding, and a burgundy tie that Grace said made me look distinguished. I felt like I was wearing a costume, playing dress up in my father-in-law's world. Matsuri Restaurant sat in the upscale district downtown, the kind of place where you needed a reservation weeks in advance, and the menu didn't list prices. I'd passed it a dozen times, but never been inside. The entrance was marked by a simple wooden sign with elegant kanji characters and a stone pathway that curved through a small garden. Even though we were in the middle of the city, it was designed to make you feel like you were stepping into another world. I arrived at 6:55 p.m., not too early to seem desperate. Not late enough to be disrespectful. Richard was already there, standing near the host station in a navy suit that probably cost more than my car payment. Next to him stood a man I assumed was Tanaka-san. Late 50s, silver-rimmed glasses, an expression of polite interest that seemed carved from stone. David Richards' handshake was firm, brief. This is Tanaka Hiroshi, CEO of Hiroshi Industries. Tanaka-san, this is my son-in-law. David Morrison, he's a marketing consultant. I bowed slightly, not too deep, just enough to show respect, and offered my hand. It's an honor to meet you, sir. Hanakin's handshake was measured, his eyes sharp. He said something in Japanese, and Richard laughed a calculated sound, like he'd practiced it. He says, the honor is his. Richard translated, though I already knew that. He's impressed that I have a consultant in the family. Here's what Richard didn't know. I spoke Japanese fluently. It wasn't something I advertised. I'd spent 2 years in Japan after college, teaching English in a small city outside Osaka. I'd fallen in love with the language, the culture, the way silence could mean more than words. I'd stayed longer than I planned, studying at night, practicing with anyone who would talk to me. By the time I came back to the States, I could navigate business meetings, understand news broadcasts, read novels in their original form. But it never came up with Richard. Why would it? We talked about weather, about Grace, about surface things. He never asked about my time abroad. Never showed interest in anything that didn't directly relate to his world. And Grace knew I spoke some Japanese, but didn't realize the extent. To her, it was a fun party trick. I could order sushi properly, recognize characters on street signs. So, when Tanaka spoke, I kept my face neutral, politely blank. The international expression of someone waiting for translation. Richard gestured toward the private dining room. Shall we? The room was beautiful in that austere way that speaks of wealth. Low table, cushioned floor seating, a scroll painting on the wall depicting mountains shrouded in mist, a server in a crisp kimono, poured tea with movements so precise they looked choreographed. We settled in, Richard and Tanaka-san across from each other, me slightly to Richard's left. The positioning felt deliberate. I was close enough to be included, but far enough to be clearly secondary. A supporting character in someone else's scene. The conversation started safe, neutral. Richard talked about Chen Dynamics' growth trajectory, about their distribution network, about their reputation for reliability. Kanakin listened with that same carved expression, occasionally nodding, asking clarifying questions through Richard's interpretation. Except Richard wasn't just interpreting, he was editing. When Tanaka-san asked about labor practices at their partner factories, Richard translated it as a question about production capacity. When Tanaka-san mentioned concerns about supply chain transparency, Richard spun it into a question about logistics efficiency. I kept my face still, sipped my tea, nodded at appropriate moments, but inside something was shifting. A discomfort that started as a pin prick and began to spread. The food arrived in waves, sushimi arranged like flowers, tempura so light it seemed to float. Miso soup served in lacquered bowls. Richard raised his glass in a toast. To partnership, he said, and Tanaka-san echoed him in Japanese. We drank. The sake was smooth, warm going down. Then Tanaka-san said something that made me set down my cup very carefully. This project involves a significant investment. I only do business with transparent people. Will you show me your company's real financial situation? Richard smiled. Warm, grandfatherly. He responded in English, which I would then need to translate back in my head to understand what Kanakin was hearing. Kanakin wants to confirm our mutual commitment to this partnership. He's expressing his enthusiasm. That wasn't remotely what he said. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The kind of cold that has nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with recognition. The moment when you realize the ground beneath you isn't solid. Kanakin's eyes narrowed slightly. He wasn't stupid. He could sense the discrepancy. Even if he couldn't pinpoint it, he said something else slower this time, more deliberate. I don't work with liars. Richard laughed again. He says he's excited to see our facility next week. The lie was so blatant, so utterly disconnected from what had actually been said that for a moment I thought I'd misheard. That my Japanese was rustier than I thought. But no, I understood perfectly. And Richard was deliberately, systematically mistranslating every challenging question Tanaka-san asked. I looked at my father-in-law. Really looked at him. He was relaxed, confident, completely at ease. He thought he was in control. He thought he could manipulate this conversation, steer it toward whatever outcome he wanted, and no one would be the wiser because why would they? Who brings someone who speaks Japanese to a business dinner and doesn't mention it? Tanaka-san was speaking again. I want to ask about your son-in-law. Does he speak Japanese? Richard glanced at me. Then back to Tanakin. He's asking what you think of the meal, David. Tell him it's excellent. My mouth was dry. It's excellent, I said. Best I've had. Kanakin studied me for a long moment. Then he switched to English, accented but clear. You enjoy Japanese food, Mr. Morrison? Very much, I said. My voice sounded normal, calm, like I wasn't screaming internally. My wife and I try to visit authentic places when we can. Have you been to Japan? The question hung there. Richard's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Alert. A long time ago, I said carefully. Right after college. I taught English for a while. Ah. Tanaka-san's expression didn't change. Where? Osaka Prefecture. A small city. You probably wouldn't know it. I see. He returned to his sake, to his food. But I could feel him thinking, processing, calculating. The dinner continued. More dishes arrived. More lies were translated. Richard grew increasingly comfortable, talking about profit margins that sounded inflated, about supplier relationships that seemed too good to be true, about contracts he claimed were already secured, when Tanakin had explicitly said he needed to see documentation first. And I sat there, silent. Complicit by virtue of my silence. Because here's the thing about knowledge. Once you have it, every moment you don't act becomes a choice. Every second I sat there understanding the real conversation while Richard spun his fiction, I became part of the deception. Not actively, I wasn't lying, but I was allowing the lies to continue. I was the silent witness to something that felt increasingly like fraud. When Tanaka-san excused himself to take a phone call, Richard leaned toward me. "This is going well," he said quietly. "Better than I expected. Tanaka's on board. I can feel it." "Are you sure he understands everything you're telling him?" I asked carefully. Richard waved a hand. "His English is good enough for the important parts. And I've been working with Japanese clients for 20 years, David. I know how to navigate this." "You're lying to him." I wanted to say, "You're mistranslating every difficult question. You're building a partnership on deception." But I didn't say it. I nodded. I sipped my tea. I became complicit. Tanaka-san returned. The dinner wound down. We exchanged business cards, mine simple and somewhat apologetic next to Richard's embossed perfection and Tanaka-san's minimalist elegance. We bowed. We shook hands. Richard scheduled a follow-up meeting. As we walked out into the cold night air, Richard clapped me on the shoulder. "Thanks for coming, David. I know this isn't usually your scene, but it means something that you were here. Family matters in business. It shows stability." "I'm glad I could help," I said automatically. He handed his valet ticket to the attendant. "Grace mentioned you're looking to expand your consulting practice. I might have some contacts for you, people who could use your services. Let me make some calls." It was an offering, a reward for good behavior, for playing my part, for being the appropriate son-in-law who dressed well and made polite conversation and asked no uncomfortable questions. I should have felt grateful. Instead, I felt dirty, like I'd witnessed a crime and done nothing, like I'd sold something I couldn't name for the promise of professional advancement I wasn't sure I wanted. I drove home in silence. Grace was already asleep when I got there. The apartment dark, except for the small lamp she always left on in the hallway. I stood in the doorway to our bedroom, watching her breathe, peaceful and unaware. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard. "Good work tonight. We'll talk soon." I deleted it. Then I sat down at our kitchen table and opened my laptop. I pulled up Chen Dynamics' website, started clicking through pages I'd never bothered to read before. Public filings, press releases, partnership announcements. I was looking for something. I didn't know what yet, but I knew this. Something was deeply wrong. And I was the only person in that room who understood exactly how wrong it was. The question was what I was going to do about it. If you've ever discovered something you weren't supposed to know, you understand the weight of it. How it sits in your chest like a stone. How every conversation afterward feels like navigating a minefield because you're carrying information that changes everything. I sat there until sunrise, reading, researching, beginning to understand the scope of what I'd witnessed. And slowly, very slowly, I began to form a plan. Grace found me at the kitchen table that morning, laptop still open, cold coffee in a mug I didn't remember pouring. "Did you even come to bed?" Her voice was soft with sleep, concerned. She wore my old college t-shirt, her hair pulled into a messy bun. Beautiful in that unconscious way that made my chest ache. I closed the laptop too quickly. The kind of movement that draws attention rather than deflects it. "Couldn't sleep," I said, which was true. "Too wired from the dinner." She smiled, patting over to kiss my forehead. "I knew it would go well. Dad wouldn't have invited you if he didn't think you could handle it." She moved to the coffee maker, starting a fresh pot. "Tell me everything. Was the client impressed? Did Dad introduce you properly? Oh, God. Was the food amazing?" I watched her. My wife, the woman who saw good in everyone, who believed her father's world was built on hard work and integrity because that's what he told her. That's what she needed to believe. "The food was incredible," I said. Each word felt calculated. Tanaka-san seemed interested in the partnership. Interested. That's it. She turned, mocked, disappointed. "Come on, give me details. What did they talk about?" "Your father lied repeatedly, systematically to a man who was trying to do honest business." And I sat there and let it happen. "Supply chains," I said instead. "Distribution networks, pretty technical stuff." I mostly just listened. It wasn't quite a lie, more like a strategic omission. The kind of thing that feels like betrayal even as you're doing it. Grace poured 2 cups of coffee, added cream to mine the way I liked it. "Dad texted me this morning. He said you were great, that you really impressed him." She handed me the mug, her eyes bright. "David, this could be huge for us if he starts referring clients to you. If he actually brings you into his business circle." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. We'd been talking about buying a house, about starting a family, about all the things that required money we didn't quite have yet. Richard's world, his connections, his influence could change that. Could change everything. Yeah, I said. It could be. She kissed me again longer this time, then headed to the shower. I heard the water start, heard her humming something cheerful and off-key. I reopened the laptop. Research became my new obsession. I told myself it was due diligence, professional curiosity, the natural instinct of someone who'd stumbled onto information that didn't add up. But really, it was something else, a compulsion. The same way you can't stop pressing on a bruise to see if it still hurts. Chen Dynamics' public information was impressive on the surface. 23 years in business, steady growth, partnerships with major retailers, suppliers across Asia. Richard's biography on the company website painted him as a self-made success story. Immigrant parents worked his way through college. Built his empire from nothing, but when you looked closer, really looked, things started to blur at the edges. Financial statements that were technically compliant but vague in crucial areas. Partner companies that existed on paper but had minimal online presence. Glowing testimonials from clients whose names, when I searched them, led to dead ends or businesses that had dissolved years ago. And then there were the lawsuits buried deep in public records, settled quietly, sealed under confidentiality agreements. 3 in the past 5 years, all from Asian suppliers claiming breach of contract, unpaid invoices, misrepresentation of terms, nothing proven, nothing that stuck, but a pattern nonetheless. Like seeing the same card come up too many times in what's supposed to be a random shuffle. I created a folder on my laptop, labeled it Market Research, generic enough that Grace wouldn't think twice if she saw it. Inside, I started compiling everything, screenshots of suspicious transactions, links to archived news articles, notes on the discrepancies between what Richard had said at dinner and what I could verify independently. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. My father-in-law was running a sophisticated shell game. Not quite illegal, he was too smart for that, but profoundly unethical. He would sign contracts with suppliers based on inflated promises, deliver partial payments, then dispute terms when it came time for full compensation. He'd leverage language barriers and cultural differences, knowing most small Asian manufacturers couldn't afford to pursue international litigation. And he was about to do the same thing to Tanaka Hiroshi. Hiroshi Industries wasn't some small supplier. They were established, respected, substantial. But Richard had clearly identified them as his next mark. The dinner, the charm offensive, the careful mistranslations. It was all set up. He was going to convince Tanaka to commit significant resources. Probably front-load production or provide favorable credit terms. And then I didn't know exactly what came next, but I knew it wouldn't be honest. "You've been distant," Grace said it on Saturday morning, standing in our bedroom doorway while I sat at my makeshift desk. Really just a corner of our dining table where I'd claimed squatter's rights. My laptop was open again, always open now. I looked up, just busy. Got a few new client proposals I'm working on a Saturday. She crossed her arms, not angry, worried. "David, you barely ate dinner last night. You're up until 2-3 in the morning every night. And when I talk to you, you're somewhere else." She wasn't wrong. I'd been somewhere else. Stuck in a loop of discovery and dread trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do with information I never should have had. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "This project is just it's complicated." "Is it for one of Dad's contacts?" she asked hopefully. "Did he send work your way already?" The assumption stung that any professional success I had would naturally flow from Richard's generosity, that I needed his intervention to thrive. "No," I said, different client. Grace moved closer, put her hand on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you. You know that, right? You don't need to kill yourself trying to prove something." But that was exactly what I was doing. Trying to prove something to myself, maybe. That I wasn't just the son-in-law who showed up on holidays and smiled politely. That I had principles that mattered more than comfort, that I could see wrongdoing and not just turn away because it was easier. "I know," I said. I pulled her down for a kiss, held her a moment longer than necessary, like I was trying to memorize something I was afraid of losing. Monday, I called in sick to work, told my actual clients I had food poisoning, spent the day at the public library instead, using their computers and guest Wi-Fi because I was becoming paranoid about digital footprints. I found Tanaka Hiroshi's professional profile on LinkedIn. Distinguished career, board member of 2 nonprofits focused on ethical business practices, published articles about corporate responsibility and transparent supply chains. He wasn't just a businessman. He was someone who genuinely cared about doing things right. And Richard was going to destroy him or try to anyway. Because Tanaka wasn't some small operation that could be bullied or manipulated. He had resources. He had reputation. If Richard tried his usual tactics and Tanaka discovered the deception, the lawsuit would be massive, public. It would unravel everything Richard had built and Grace would be caught in the aftermath. Her father exposed, her family name dragged through proceedings and press coverage. The carefully constructed world she lived in would collapse. I could prevent that. I could say nothing, do nothing, let events unfold however they would, stay out of it, protect my marriage, my relationship with my wife's family, my own comfortable position in Richard's good graces, or I could act. The question was, how and at what cost? That night, Grace's mother called. I heard Grace on the phone in the other room, her voice bright and animated. "Mom, I know," Dad said. "The dinner went amazing." "Yes, David was perfect." "No, he didn't say anything embarrassing." I sat very still, listening to my wife defend me against criticisms I hadn't heard. Prove my worth to parents who'd apparently been skeptical. When she hung up, she came into the kitchen where I was pretending to cook dinner. "Mom says, Dad's really serious about this Hiroshi partnership. He thinks it could be the biggest deal of his career." She wrapped her arms around me from behind and she said, "Thank you for being there, for supporting him." She said it meant a lot. I stared at the vegetables I was chopping. "I didn't do much. You were there. That's what matters." She rested her chin on my shoulder. "They're having a family dinner Friday to celebrate the partnership moving forward. You'll come, right?" "Of course," I said automatically. "Good," because she hesitated. "I know they can be a lot sometimes. Dad especially. But they're trying, David. They really are. They're accepting you, seeing you as part of the family, not just the guy who married me." The words hit like physical blows because she meant them kindly, because she thought she was sharing good news. Because she had no idea that her father's acceptance was conditional, transactional, based entirely on my perceived usefulness and continued compliance. "That's great," I managed. "Really great." She squeezed me tighter. "I love you. I love you, too." And I did. God, I did. Which made everything so much harder. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Mr. Morrison." The voice was accented. Formal. "This is Tanaka Hiroshi. We met last week at Matsuri." My heart stopped. Actually stopped, then started again, too fast, too hard. "Mr. Tanaka," I said carefully. "This is unexpected. I apologize for calling directly. I obtained your number from the business card you provided." A pause. "I wonder if you might have time to meet for coffee perhaps. There are some matters regarding your father-in-law's company that I would like to discuss." Every warning bell in my head started ringing at once. This was it. The moment where staying neutral became impossible, where I had to choose a side. "What kind of matters?" I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. "I believe you understood more of our dinner conversation than you indicated, Mr. Morrison. Am I correct?" My mouth was dry. My hand holding the phone was shaking. "I am not sure what you mean." "I have been in business for 30 years, Tanaka said quietly. "I know when someone is truly listening and when they are merely waiting their turn to speak. You were listening very carefully. And your face, Mr. Morrison, it showed things. Small things, but things nonetheless." I closed my eyes. "Mr. Tanaka, I am not asking you to betray anyone," he interrupted. "I am simply asking for truth. I am about to commit significant resources to a partnership with Chen Dynamics. If there are reasons I should reconsider, I believe I deserve to know. Don't you agree?" It was a fair question, a reasonable question. The kind of question a person with integrity would answer honestly. "I don't know if I can help you," I said finally. "Cannot or will not." The distinction mattered. Cannot implied impossibility beyond my control. Will not implied choice, implied that I was actively choosing to protect Richard's deception. "It's complicated," I said. "Most important things are." Tanaka's voice remained gentle, patient. "Mr. Morrison, I am staying at the Meridian Hotel downtown. I will be in the lobby restaurant tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock having breakfast. If you choose to join me, I will be grateful for your time. If you do not appear, I will understand and will not contact you again. Mr. Tanaka, I have to think about, of course, think carefully, but please understand. I'm not asking you to lie. I'm asking you not to stay silent while lies continue. There is a difference." He hung up. I sat there holding my dead phone, feeling like I'd been punched, because he was right. There was a difference. And I'd been pretending there wasn't. Telling myself that not actively lying was enough. That silence wasn't complicity. But it was. Every moment I'd sat at that dinner, understanding what was really being said, watching Richard manipulate and deceive, I'd been complicit. I'd been part of it. That night, I barely spoke. Grace noticed. Of course, she noticed, but I blamed it on work stress. She accepted the excuse because she wanted to, because it was easier than pushing. I lay awake next to her, listening to her breathe, watching the shadows move across the ceiling. 8 o'clock, the Meridian Hotel. Tomorrow, if I told Tanaka the truth, I would be betraying my father-in-law, potentially destroying his business, his reputation. Grace would never forgive me. Her family would never forgive me. My marriage might not survive it. If I didn't go, I would be choosing comfort over integrity. I would be saying that my personal peace was worth more than truth. That some people's right to honest business dealings didn't matter as much as my need to avoid conflict. I thought about the suppliers Richard had cheated. Small manufacturers, people who trusted him, who delivered goods or services in good faith and been left holding unpaid invoices and broken promises. I thought about how Richard had used cultural differences as weapons, how he'd taken advantage of language barriers, legal distances, the simple fact that pursuing justice internationally was expensive and exhausting. I thought about Tanaka Hiroshi's articles about ethical business practices, about transparency, about the kind of world he was trying to build. And I thought about Grace, my wife, the woman I loved, the innocent party in all of this, who didn't deserve to have her world shattered because her husband couldn't keep his mouth shut. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I got out of bed, went to the bathroom, closed the door, sat on the floor with my back against the wall. I pulled out my phone, searched for flights to nowhere in particular, rental cars, hotels in distant cities. Not because I was actually planning to run, though. The thought had crossed my mind, but because I needed to know I had options. Escape routes. Ways out of whatever was coming. Then I deleted the searches, cleared my browser history. If you've ever been trapped between two impossible choices, you know this feeling. The way your mind spins, trying to find an angle you haven't considered. A third option, a magical solution where no one gets hurt and everyone's happy, and you don't have to be the one who brings the hammer down. But life doesn't work that way. Not really. Sometimes you just have to choose which bridge to burn and try to live with the smoke. I stayed on that bathroom floor until dawn broke through the small window above the shower. Watched the darkness turn gray, then gold, then the harsh white of morning. Grace knocked softly. "David, you okay?" "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded strange, distant. "Just needed a minute." "Come back to bed. It's early." "I will soon." But I didn't. I stayed there, counting minutes, watching light move across tiles, trying to find the courage to do what I already knew I was going to do. 7:45. I checked my reflection in the mirror. I looked like someone who hadn't slept, someone carrying something heavy. I looked like someone about to change everything. The Meridian Hotel lobby smelled like expensive coffee and quiet money. I stood outside the glass doors for 5 minutes, maybe 10, watching well-dressed people flow in and out. Business travelers with rolling suitcases and practiced efficiency. Hotel guests in athleisure heading to whatever spa or workout facility justified the room rate. Everyone moving with purpose, like they knew exactly where they belonged. I didn't belong here. I belonged at home in bed with my wife, pretending I hadn't seen what I'd seen. Pretending I didn't know what I knew. 7:58. I pushed through the doors. The restaurant was tucked off the main lobby, all blonde wood and soft lighting. The kind of place where breakfast cost $30 and no one blinked. Tanaka sat at a corner table reading something on a tablet, a pot of tea steaming gently beside him. He wore a crisp white shirt, no tie, reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked like someone's thoughtful uncle, not a CEO about to be defrauded. He glanced up as I approached. Something shifted in his expression, not quite relief, but maybe satisfaction, like he'd placed a bet and won. "Mr. Morrison," he said, standing, bowing slightly. "I am grateful you came." I sat down before I could change my mind. Before I could turn around and run, a server appeared immediately. Poured me water. I didn't remember requesting. Asked if I wanted coffee. I said yes, even though I'd already had 3 cups at home, watching dawn break. Trying to convince myself I wasn't about to blow up my life. "I was not certain you would come," Tanaka said once we were alone. He removed his reading glasses, folded them carefully. "It takes courage what you are doing." "I'm not doing anything yet," I said. My voice sounded strange. Strained. "I'm just here." That in itself is something. He poured tea into a second cup, pushed it toward me. "Green tea, very calming. I find it helps with difficult conversations." I wrapped my hands around the cup. The warmth was grounding, real. Everything else felt like I was watching it happen to someone else. "Mr. Tanaka, before we go any further, I need to know what exactly do you want from me?" He studied me for a long moment. Truth, he said simply. At the dinner last Thursday, your father-in-law was translating my questions, but I do not believe he was translating them accurately. Am I correct? The moment stretched. This was it. The point of no return. I could still lie. Could say I didn't speak Japanese well enough to be sure that maybe there were just some cultural misunderstandings that I really couldn't help him. But I was so tired of lying. Even the passive lies, the lies of omission, they were eating me from the inside out. Yes, I said. You're correct. Tanaka didn't react dramatically. He simply nodded like I'd confirmed something he already knew. Will you tell me what I actually said and what your father-in-law claimed I said? This was the cliff edge, the moment of jumping. Once I started talking, I couldn't take it back. I thought about Grace. Asleep when I left, peaceful and trusting. I thought about the family dinner on Friday, the celebration of a partnership built on deception. I thought about wedding photos on our mantle, about Richard's hand on my shoulder, about being welcomed into a family that was fundamentally corrupt. You asked about transparency, I said quietly. About seeing Chen Dynamics' real financial situation. Richard told you that you were expressing enthusiasm for the partnership. Tanaka's jaw tightened. Continue. So I did. I told him everything. Every mistranslation, every deflection, every lie Richard had carefully constructed. I told him how when he'd said he only worked with transparent people, Richard had claimed he was confirming his commitment. How when he'd stated explicitly that he didn't work with liars, Richard had translated it as excitement about touring the facility. With each revelation, Tanaka's expression grew darker, not angry, controlled, but you could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, the pieces falling into place. When you asked if I spoke Japanese, I said, Richard told me you were asking about the meal. He specifically didn't want you to know I understood because then I would have known immediately that he was lying. Tanaka sat down his teacup with precise care. Mr. Morrison, why did you not say something at the time? Why allow this deception to continue? The question wasn't accusatory, just honest. Wanting to understand? Because he's my father-in-law, I said. Because my wife loves him and trusts him. Because I was afraid of what telling the truth would cost me. And now I'm more afraid of what staying silent will cost me. And you? I met his eyes. You're not his first, are you? You're not the first person he's done this to. Tanaka shook his head slowly. I suspected as much. When I began my due diligence on Chen Dynamics, there were inconsistencies, small things that did not align. Former partners who would not return calls, sealed legal settlements, nothing conclusive, but enough to create doubt. So why move forward at all? Because I wanted to give him the benefit of that doubt because I believe in assuming good faith until proven otherwise. His voice hardened. But I also believe in protecting myself and my company, which is why I had my legal team continuing their investigation, even as we moved toward partnership discussions. He pulled out his phone, swiped through something, then turned it toward me. It was an email thread, all in Japanese, between his lawyers and what looked like representatives from several Asian manufacturing companies. 3 confirmed cases of contract manipulation, Tanaka said. 2 cases of partial payment followed by spurious quality complaints to avoid full compensation. 1 case of complete non-payment with threats of legal action if pursued. All within the past 6 years, all with smaller suppliers who could not afford international litigation. I felt sick. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? Because he is careful. He stays just within legal boundaries. Exploits language barriers and cultural differences, makes it more expensive to pursue justice than to accept the loss. It is a strategy, Mr. Morrison. A calculated, methodical strategy of predation. The coffee arrived. I didn't touch it. Couldn't imagine putting anything in my stomach right now. There is something else, Tanaka said. He pulled a folder from the bag beside his chair, slid it across the table. This arrived yesterday from my investigators. I think you should see it. I opened the folder. Financial documents. Chen Dynamics internal records somehow obtained by Tanaka's team, and they painted a very different picture than the public filings I'd seen. The company was in trouble. Deep trouble. Revenue was down 40% over 3 years. Several major clients had severed relationships. The operational accounts were being shuffled between subsidiaries in what looked like sophisticated money laundering, moving funds around to create the illusion of solvency while masking significant debt. Richard Chen is desperate, Tanaka said quietly. He needs this partnership not to grow his business, but to save it. My company's resources, our reputation, our distribution network. He plans to use them as collateral to secure loans he cannot currently obtain. Then when those loans come due and he cannot pay, the liability will partially fall on Hiroshi Industries as his partner. Jesus. The word came out barely above a whisper. If I had signed the preliminary agreement we discussed, which he was pushing to finalize this week, I would have exposed my company to potentially millions in fraudulent debt. Tanaka closed the folder. Your father-in-law is not just unethical, Mr. Morrison. He is engaged in what my lawyers believe constitutes criminal fraud. The restaurant sounds faded to background noise. The clink of silverware, the murmur of conversation, the soft jazz playing through hidden speakers. It all felt very far away. What are you going to do? I asked. Legally, I'm withdrawing from all partnership discussions immediately. My lawyers will file formal complaints with the appropriate regulatory agencies. What happens after that is beyond my control. He paused. But that is not why I asked you here. Then why? Tanaka leaned forward. Because you are in danger, Mr. Morrison. When I withdraw, when investigations begin, your father-in-law will look for explanations. He will wonder how his deceptions were discovered. And he will remember that you were present at our dinner, that you sat silent while he spoke Japanese. Eventually, he may wonder why you were so silent. The implication settled over me like ice water. You think he'll blame me? I think he will look for someone to blame, and you are the obvious variable, the new element in his careful equation. Tanaka's voice softened. I am telling you this not to frighten you, but to give you time to prepare, to protect yourself, and if I may say, to protect your wife. She deserves to know who her father truly is. Grace, God, Grace. She won't believe me, I said. If I tell her any of this, she'll think I'm attacking her father, that I'm trying to drive a wedge between them. Perhaps initially, Tanaka pulled another document from his folder, which is why I am giving you this, a full report from my investigators with documentation, not speculation, not interpretation, simply facts, dates, records. If you choose to show it to her, she will have evidence. If you choose not to, at least you will know the full truth of what you are protecting her from. He slid the document across the table. It was thick, professional, devastating. Years of Richard's predatory practices laid out in meticulous detail. Why are you helping me? I asked. You don't know me. You owe me nothing. Tanaka smiled, sad and tired. Because you did something difficult today. You chose truth over comfort. That is rare, Mr. Morrison. And because he hesitated, I have a son-in-law myself in Japan, a good man who married my daughter 5 years ago. When they married, I told him, if I ever do something wrong, if I ever compromise my principles, I hope you will have the courage to speak honestly, not to betray me, but to save me from myself. He stood, preparing to leave. Your father-in-law is beyond saving, I think. But you are not, and neither is your marriage, if you handle this with wisdom and compassion. I stood too automatically. We bowed to each other, mine deeper, more grateful than I could articulate. Mr. Tanaka, I said, thank you for giving me a choice. We always have choices, Mr. Morrison. The question is whether we have the courage to make the hard ones. He collected his things, left cash on the table for the meal I hadn't eaten. One more thing, when this becomes public, and it will, you may need someone to vouch for your character, for the fact that you came forward, not out of malice, but out of principle. If that time comes, my lawyers have instructions to provide testimony on your behalf. He left me standing there, holding a folder full of truth I wasn't sure I was ready to carry. I sat back down, ordered more coffee I didn't drink. Read through the entire report, every page, every damning detail. Tanaka's investigators had been thorough. Bank records showing suspicious transfers. Emails between Richard and his accountants discussing how to manage supplier disputes. Testimonials from people he defrauded, their businesses damaged or destroyed, their trust in international commerce shattered, and photos. Richard at expensive restaurants, driving luxury cars, wearing watches that cost more than my annual salary. All while claiming his company was struggling, all while telling suppliers he couldn't afford full payment, all while presenting himself as a humble businessman trying to make an honest living. The hypocrisy was staggering, the calculated cruelty of it. These weren't abstract numbers on a spreadsheet. These were real people, real families, real lives, disrupted because one man decided his comfort mattered more than their livelihoods. My phone buzzed. Grace, good morning. You left early. Everything okay? I stared at the message at the three bright, cheerful words that represented my wife's fundamental goodness. Her inability to imagine that the people she loved could be capable of deep, systematic evil. I typed, just had an early meeting. Home soon. Love you. 3 lies and 12 words. Because it wasn't just a meeting. I wouldn't be home soon. Not really. Not the version of me she knew. And I wasn't sure I still knew what love meant in the context of what I was about to do, but I sent it anyway. Then I took the folder, walked out of the Meridian Hotel, and got in my car. I sat there in the parking garage, surrounded by concrete and exhaust fumes and the mechanical hum of ventilation systems. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I trusted completely. My older brother James, a lawyer, someone who'd understand both the legal implications and the personal cost of what I was carrying. "Little brother," he answered, always with the same greeting since we were kids. "It's barely 9 o'clock in the morning." "Who calls at 9 o'clock in the morning?" "James," I said, "I need help and I need you not to tell anyone, not even Mom, until I figure out what I'm doing." His tone changed immediately. "What happened?" So I told him, sitting in that parking garage, cars coming and going around me, I told him everything. The dinner, the lies, the meeting with Tanaka, the folder full of evidence now sitting on my passenger seat like a bomb. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then David, "Jesus Christ, you're absolutely sure about this?" "I watched it happen, James, and the documentation is solid. This isn't speculation." Okay. I could hear him thinking, organizing. He'd always been the steady one. "Here's what you need to do. First, you document everything from your perspective. Write down exactly what happened at the dinner. What you heard, what was said versus what was translated. Timestamp it. Be specific. That's your insurance. If this blows back on you, you think it will. I think Richard Chen sounds like the kind of man who doesn't accept responsibility, which means when hits the fan, and it will, he's going to look for scapegoats. Don't give him ammunition." I close my eyes. Grace is going to hate me. Maybe at first, but David, he paused. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is tell them a truth they don't want to hear, especially if staying silent would make you complicit in their father's crimes. She thinks he's a good man. She thinks I'm finally being accepted into the family. Then she deserves to know who's accepting you and what that acceptance is worth. We talked for another hour. James walking me through legal protections, potential consequences, ways to minimize damage, but mostly he just listened. Let me talk through my fear, my guilt, my certainty that I was about to lose everything that mattered. "You're doing the right thing," he said finally. "It doesn't feel like it. It won't feel like it for a while, but you are." I wasn't sure I believed him, but I wanted to. God, I wanted to. I drove home slowly, taking the long way, trying to figure out how to walk back into my apartment and look at my wife with all this knowledge sitting between us. The folder sat on the passenger seat like a passenger itself, silent, accusatory, undeniable. When I finally pulled into our building's parking lot, I sat there for another 10 minutes, gathering courage I wasn't sure I had. Then I grabbed the folder, got out of the car, and walked toward a conversation that was going to change everything. If you've ever stood at the threshold of your own life, knowing that once you step forward, nothing will ever be the same. You understand this moment, the weight of it, the finality. I put my key in the lock, heard Grace singing in the kitchen, something off-key and happy. And I opened the door. Grace was making pancakes. I could smell them before I even closed the door. That sweet, buttery smell that meant weekend mornings and lazy contentment. She was at the stove, spatula in hand, humming along to something playing from her phone. She'd changed out of my t-shirt into jeans and a soft sweater, pulled her hair back with a clip that was already losing its grip. She turned when I entered, smiled. That sunrise smile that had made me fall in love with her in the first place. "There you are. I was starting to think your meeting had kidnapped you. Are you hungry?" I made way too much batter. I set my keys on the counter. The folder was tucked under my arm, hidden against my body. Like if I kept it out of sight, I could delay what came next. "Grace," I said, "we need to talk." The smile faltered. "Not gone, just uncertain." "Okay, that sounds ominous. What's wrong?" "Everything. I wanted to say everything is wrong and it's about to get worse and I'm so sorry." "Can you turn off the stove?" I asked. Now the smile disappeared completely. She switched off the burner, set down the spatula with careful precision. "David, you're scaring me. What happened at your meeting?" I moved to the kitchen table, sat down before my legs could give out. She followed, sat across from me, her hands folded in front of her like she was bracing for impact. "It wasn't a meeting," I said. "It was breakfast with Tanaka Hiroshi." Her brow furrowed. "Dad's client. Why would you?" Then her eyes widened. "Oh, God. Did you do something? Did you mess up the deal somehow?" "David, if you know, I didn't mess up anything." I pulled the folder out, set it on the table between us. "Grace, there's something about your father that you need to know. Something I should have told you days ago, but I was afraid. I'm still afraid. But you deserve the truth." She stared at the folder like it might bite her. "What truth? What are you talking about?" So I told her about the dinner, about understanding Japanese, About Richard's systematic mistranslations. I kept my voice steady, clinical almost, because if I let emotion in, I'd never get through it. But I watched her face as I spoke. Watched understanding turn to confusion, turn to denial, turn to something harder. That's not possible, she said when I paused. You must have misunderstood. Dad's Japanese might not be perfect, but he wouldn't deliberately lie to a client. He wouldn't. Grace, I speak Japanese fluently. I lived there for 2 years. I know what I heard. You never told me you were fluent. There was accusation in it. Like I'd been hiding something suspicious rather than just a skill that never came up. It never seemed important, but it is now because your father wasn't just making mistakes. He was deliberately, systematically deceiving Tanaka. And when I started looking into Chen dynamics, really looking, I found out it's not the first time. I pushed the folder toward her. This is from Tanaka's investigators. Documentation of your father's business practices over the past 6 years. Grace, your dad has been defrauding suppliers. Small manufacturers in Asia who can't afford to fight back. He's built his whole empire on a foundation of exploitation and lies. She didn't touch the folder. I don't believe you. I know. I knew you wouldn't. Which is why I brought evidence. Evidence from his competitor. From someone who has every reason to make Dad look bad. Her voice was rising now. Color flooding her cheeks. God. David. What did he offer you? What did Tanaka promise you to turn against my family? The accusation stung more than I expected. He didn't offer me anything. He asked for the truth and I gave it to him. You gave it to him? You betrayed my father? Your family? She stood up abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. Do you have any idea what you've done? If this gets out, if Tanaka spreads these lies, they're not lies, Grace. You don't know that. You saw one dinner, had one conversation, and now you're ready to destroy everything my father built based on what? Documents from someone trying to sabotage a business deal. I stood too, facing her across the table. I saw him lie repeatedly, deliberately. I heard what was really being said, and I watched him twist it into something completely different. That's not misunderstanding. That's fraud. My father is not a criminal. The words echoed in our small kitchen. She was crying now. Angry tears that she swiped at impatiently like they were betraying her. Grace, please just look at the documentation. You don't have to believe me, but at least look at the evidence. Evidence you brought from a man who wants to hurt my family. Evidence you went behind my back to get. She wrapped her arms around herself. How long have you been planning this? Was the whole dinner just were you looking for dirt on Dad the entire time? No. God, no. I went to support him. I went because you asked me to. I never wanted to find any of this. But you went digging anyway. You couldn't just let it go, could you? You had to play detective. Had to prove something what? That you're smarter than him? That he's not good enough for you? Each word was a knife. This isn't about ego, Grace. It's about right and wrong. Right and wrong. She laughed, bitter and sharp. You don't think it was wrong to go behind my back? To meet with my father's business rival in secret? To collect evidence against my family? Like you're building some kind of case. I was trying to protect you from what? From my own father? She grabbed the folder, held it up. This is what protection looks like to you. Destroying my family, humiliating my parents. Your father is already humiliating himself. I'm just trying to stop him before he takes you down with him. Wrong thing to say. I knew at the moment the words left my mouth. Grace's expression hardened into something I'd never seen before. Something cold and closed off. Get out, she said quietly. Grace, get out of this apartment right now. We need to talk about this. We don't need to do anything. You made your choice when you went to that hotel when you decided Tanaka's version of events mattered more than your own family's. She threw the folder at me. It hit my chest. Papers scattering across the floor. Take your evidence and get out. Go stay with your brother. Go stay at a hotel. I don't care. But I don't want you here right now. Please don't do this. Let me explain. Explain what? How you decided my father was a criminal based on one dinner. How you trusted a stranger over the man who raised me. Her voice cracked. My dad is not perfect. But he's my dad, David, and you just tried to destroy him. I bent down, started gathering the scattered papers, financial records, testimonials from defrauded suppliers, evidence of systematic misconduct. All of it real, all of it damning, and none of it mattering because Grace couldn't see past her own loyalty. I love you, I said, still on my knees, clutching documents that felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. I love you, and I was trying to do the right thing. The right thing would have been talking to me first. The right thing would have been coming to me before you went to Tanaka. The right thing would have been trusting me enough to tell me what you thought you saw instead of going behind my back like a spy. She was right about that. I should have told her immediately. Should have sat down that first night and said, something happened at dinner. Something that concerns me. Can we talk about it? But I'd been afraid. Afraid of exactly this. Her disbelief, her anger, her choosing her father over me. And in being afraid, I'd made everything worse. I'm sorry. I said, you're right. I should have come to you first. But Grace, the things in this folder, they're real. They're documented. And if you don't look at them, if you refuse to even consider that your father might not be who you think he is, then we're in trouble. Real trouble. She turned away from me, arms still wrapped around herself like she was holding broken pieces together. We're already in trouble, David. You made sure of that. I stood up, folder reconstructed, but disheveled like me. What do you want me to do? I want you to leave. I need time to think. How much time? I don't know. She whirled back to face me. I don't know anything anymore. My husband just accused my father of being a criminal. My family is planning a celebration dinner and now you're telling me it should be a funeral. I need to process this without you standing here looking at me like I'm the one who's wrong for not immediately believing the worst about the man who raised me. Fair. It was fair. Even if it felt like my heart was being torn out through my throat. Okay, I said. I'll go. But Grace, please look at the documentation. Not for me, for yourself. Because if I'm right, if even half of this is true, you need to know before Friday's dinner. That dinner is about celebrating Dad's success, about our family supporting him. And you want me to what? Show up with accusations. Destroy his moment. I want you to know the truth before you celebrate a partnership that's built on fraud. She flinched like I'd hit her. Just go, David, please, before I say something we can't take back. Too late, I thought. We'd both already said things that felt irrevocable, but I nodded, grabbed my keys, headed for the door. David, I turned. For a second, I thought she was going to call me back. Going to say she was sorry, that we'd work through this together. Instead, she said, my father is a good man. Whatever you think you found, whatever Tanaka told you, my father is a good man. And when this is over, when the truth actually comes out, you're going to owe him an apology. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. Wanted to make her see. But you can't force someone to truth. They have to choose to see it themselves. I hope you're right, I said. And meant it. God, I meant it. How much easier everything would be if I was wrong. If Richard was innocent and I was just paranoid, jealous, misinterpreting. But I wasn't wrong. And deep down underneath her anger and denial, I think Grace knew it, too. Which was why she was so angry. Because knowing something and accepting it are two different things. I left. I drove to James' place. He lived 40 minutes away in a neighborhood he could barely afford. A one-bedroom apartment that smelled like old coffee and law books. He opened the door in sweatpants and a faded band t-shirt, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. That bad? He asked. Worse, he made coffee. I didn't drink while I sat on his couch and told him everything. Grace's reaction, her denial, her anger, the way she'd looked at me like I was a stranger, someone capable of betrayal. She'll come around, James said. Once she looks at the documentation, she won't look at it. She threw it at me. Okay. But once the news breaks, once Tanaka files his complaints and investigations start, she'll blame me for starting it. I put my head in my hands. She'll think I initiated everything, that I set her father up somehow. Did you tell her that Tanaka already knew? That his investigators had already found everything before you even met? She didn't want to hear it. In her mind, I went to Tanaka first. I chose him over her family. Nothing else matters. James sat down across from me. David, listen. I know this feels impossible right now, but you did the right thing. When Grace calms down, when she has time to process, what if she doesn't? What if this is it? What if I just destroyed my marriage to expose a man who's probably going to lawyer up and somehow escape consequences anyway? Then you'll still have done the right thing. That has to matter. But did it? If doing the right thing cost me my marriage, my wife, the future we'd planned, did it still count as right, or was it just stupid, naive? The actions of someone who thought principles mattered more than relationships? I didn't know anymore. My phone buzzed. Grace, I told my parents what you did. They're devastated. Mom is crying. Dad is talking to lawyers. I hope you're happy. I showed the message to James. Jesus, he said. She told them already without even looking at the evidence. She's loyal. It's one of the things I love about her. Even when it's misplaced. Another message. The dinner Friday is still happening. Family only. You're not invited. Family only, I repeated. I'm not family anymore. Not when it counts. James took my phone away. Stop reading these. She's hurt and lashing out. Give her time. But time felt like quicksand. The more that passed, the deeper I'd sink. Richard would be spinning the narrative right now, painting me as jealous, vindictive, maybe even mentally unstable. By Friday, the whole family would have a story about David, the betrayer. David, who tried to destroy them because he couldn't handle Richard's success, and Grace would believe it. Because believing meant accepting that her father was a monster. And no one wants to believe that about the people they love. What do? I asked James. Just wait. Hope she changes her mind. You document everything. You protect yourself legally. You cooperate with any investigations that start, and you give Grace the space she asked for, even though it's killing you. Sound advice, practical, reasonable. I hated all of it. I spent the rest of the day on James' couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the morning, looking for the point where I could have done something different, said something better, made Grace understand without making her choose between me and her father. But there wasn't one. Or if there was, I'd missed it. And now I was here, separated from my wife, accused of betrayal, carrying truth that no one wanted to hear. My phone rang around 5. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mr. Morrison, this is Richard Chen. My father-in-law's voice was cold, controlled, the warmth from the dinner completely gone. Mr. Chen, I said. James looked up sharply from his laptop. I'm calling as a courtesy to let you know that I've retained legal counsel regarding your slanderous accusations. If you continue to spread lies about me or my company, I will pursue legal action for defamation, interference with business relationships, and any other remedies my lawyers can identify. I haven't spread any lies. You met with Tanaka Hiroshi. You told him God knows what. And now he's withdrawn from our partnership discussions, citing concerns about my business practices. The last words were coded in contempt. You sabotaged a multi-million-dollar deal. David, do you understand that? You destroyed something my company desperately needed because of what? Jealousy. Spite. I told him the truth about what happened at the dinner. Your interpretation of what happened. Your biased, uninformed interpretation colored by your obvious resentment of my success. So that was the story. I was jealous, resentful, a small man trying to bring down someone bigger. If you actually believe that, I said carefully, then you have nothing to worry about. The truth will exonerate you. The truth, Richard said, is that you betrayed your family and Grace is better off knowing that now before you could do more damage. He hung up. I sat there holding the dead phone, feeling the weight of what I'd set in motion. Richard was mobilizing, building his defenses, painting me as the villain, and Grace was helping him do it. Probably without even realizing he threatened you, James said. That was a clear threat. He's protecting himself. Exactly what you said he'd do, which means he's scared. People who have nothing to hide don't threaten lawsuits before any formal accusations are made. Maybe. Or maybe he was just a bully who knew how to use intimidation. Either way, the battle lines were drawn. I was on one side, Grace and her family on the other, and the space between us felt insurmountable. Outside James' window, the sun was setting. Friday was 2 days away. The celebration dinner would happen whether I was there or not. The family would toast to Richard's success, to the partnership that almost was, to their strength in the face of outside attacks, and I would be somewhere else. Alone, right? Maybe, but alone. If you've ever chosen principle over people you love, you know this hollowness, this certainty that you did what needed doing, coupled with the devastating awareness of everything it cost. I pulled out my laptop, started writing down everything I remembered from the dinner, from my conversation with Tanaka, from Grace's reaction and Richard's threat, documentation, like James said, protection. But really, I was just trying to hold on to something solid in a world that had become unrecognizable. 3 days of silence feels like 3 years when you're waiting for your life to either repair itself or fall completely apart. I stayed at James' apartment, sleeping on a couch that was too short for my frame. Waking up with a crick in my neck that felt somehow appropriate. Physical pain to match the rest of it. I'd go to work, had to, couldn't afford not to, and sit through meetings with clients, nodding at the right moments, making the appropriate sounds while my mind was 40 minutes away in an apartment where my wife was learning to think of me as the enemy. Grace hadn't called, hadn't texted beyond that initial flurry of anger. The silence was deliberate. I knew a statement. You chose this, the silence said. Now live with it. So I did. Or tried to. James was good about it. Didn't push. Didn't pry beyond what I volunteered. He'd come home from his law firm around 7, Find me exactly where he'd left me that morning, and just coexist, make dinner, share it, let me sit with my thoughts without demanding I articulate them. Brotherhood in its purest form, presence without pressure. You should eat, he'd say, pushing a plate toward me. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. Spite is not a nutritionally complete diet. So, I'd eat mechanically, tasting nothing, fueling a body that felt increasingly disconnected from my will. Wednesday night, I got an email from one of my actual clients, a small startup I'd been consulting for on their marketing strategy. The CEO wanted to schedule a meeting. Nothing unusual except the tone felt off, too careful. I called him, got voicemail, called again an hour later. Same result. Thursday morning, he finally answered. David. Hey, listen. I've been meaning to reach out. The pause told me everything. You're terminating the contract. It's not personal. It's just we heard some things about a situation with your family and we're a small company. We can't afford to be associated with any kind of controversy right now. What situation? What did you hear? That you're involved in some kind of business dispute? Accusations of sabotage or something? Look, I don't know the details and I don't want to. We just need to protect our reputation. Richard, it had to be. He was already working his network, poisoning wells before I even knew they existed. I haven't sabotaged anything, I said. I witnessed fraud and reported it. There's a difference. Maybe, probably, but perception matters, David. And right now, the perception is that you're radioactive. I'm sorry. I really am. You did good work for us, but we can't take the risk. He hung up. Professional, apologetic, absolute. I stared at my phone. One client gone. How many more would follow? How many people were in Richard's orbit listening to his version of events, deciding I was too dangerous to associate with James, I said when he got home that evening. I think I'm being blacklisted. I told him about the client, about the carefully worded termination, about the implication that my name was becoming toxic in local business circles. He set down his briefcase with unusual force. That's tortious interference. If Richard is actively sabotaging your business relationships, that's actionable. Can I prove it? The client didn't name Richard specifically. Just said they heard things. Could have come from anywhere. Could have, but probably didn't. James pulled out his laptop. Let me make some calls. I know people who know people. We'll find out what story Richard is spreading. And then what? Sue my father-in-law while I'm trying to save my marriage. That'll really convince Grace I'm not the villain here. You think doing nothing will convince her? David, you're being attacked. You need to defend yourself, but defending myself meant escalating. Meant legal battles and depositions and all the ugly machinery of litigation. It meant burning bridges that might possibly still be repairable. It meant accepting that this situation wasn't going to resolve quietly. Wasn't going to end with Grace coming to her senses and Richard admitting wrongdoing and everyone apologizing and moving forward. It meant war. Let me think about it, I said. James looked like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded, closed his laptop, ordered Thai food neither of us really wanted. Friday arrived like an execution date. I woke up knowing that somewhere across the city, Grace was getting ready for the family dinner, picking out an outfit, maybe the blue dress I loved on her, doing her makeup in our bathroom mirror. The one with the crack we kept meaning to replace, getting ready to celebrate her father's resilience in the face of my betrayal. Would she think about me at all? Wonder where I was, what I was doing, or had she already started the process of writing me out of the narrative? David the temporary husband? David the mistake. David who almost ruined everything but didn't because family sticks together against outside threats. I went to work, had a video call with a client in Portland who hadn't heard any rumors yet, who still treated me like a professional consultant rather than a cautionary tale. It felt almost normal, a glimpse of what life used to be, before I learned to speak Japanese. Before I accepted a dinner invitation, before I chose truth over comfortable ignorance. You look tired, the client said. Everything okay? Just dealing with some family stuff, I said. The all-purpose excuse. Vague enough to shut down questions. Specific enough to seem honest. Been there. Hang in there, man. Family's important, but so is your sanity. If only those two things weren't mutually exclusive right now. I finished the call, checked my phone compulsively, even though I knew there'd be nothing. Grace hadn't blocked me. I'd checked pathetically, sending a test message to myself from her contact, but she might as well have. The silence was just as effective. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone finally rang. Unknown number again. This time it was a woman, older, formal. Mr. Morrison, this is Helen Chen. Grace's mother. I sat up straighter automatically like she could see me through the phone. Mrs. Chen. Hello. I'm calling because I think we need to have a conversation. Adult to adult. Before this situation spirals further out of control, her voice was neutral. Controlled. I couldn't tell if she was friend or enemy, mediator or messenger. I'm listening, I said carefully. My husband is very upset. Grace is heartbroken. And you, I imagine, are feeling quite righteous about whatever it is you think you've discovered. She paused. But righteousness doesn't keep families together, David. Neither does fraud. So you keep saying these accusations you've made. Do you have any idea what they could do to Richard's reputation? To our family standing in the community? Grace teaches second grade. David, her students' parents know who her father is. If these lies spread, they're not lies. Mrs. Chen, I have documentation, financial records, testimonials from people your husband defrauded, evidence of systematic misconduct spanning years, evidence from a business rival trying to sabotage a deal, evidence you were so eager to believe that you didn't stop to question the source. So that was the story Richard had sold them. Tanaka as saboteur, me as naive, easily manipulated dupe, Mrs. Chen with respect. I know what I saw. I speak Japanese fluently. I heard your husband deliberately mistranslate critical questions from Tanaka. That's not interpretation from a rival. That's first-hand witness. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was colder. You speak Japanese. How convenient. A skill you never mentioned to us. That conveniently allows you to make accusations no one else can verify. Grace knew I spoke some Japanese. Some not fluently. She mentioned you could order food and read signs. Not that you were capable of understanding complex business negotiations. Another pause. It's almost like you were keeping this skill hidden, waiting for an opportunity to use it against Richard. The accusation was absurd. Paranoid, but I could see how they'd convinced themselves of it. How Richard had probably presented it David's secret weapon, his hidden agenda, proof that this was premeditated betrayal rather than honest reporting. That's not what happened. I said it never came up because it wasn't relevant until it was. What a convenient coincidence. We were talking in circles. She wasn't calling to understand or mediate. She was calling to deliver a message dressed up as conversation. Mrs. Chen, why did you really call? To ask you to leave my family alone, to stop spreading these vicious rumors, to let Grace heal and move forward without you continuing to poison her mind against her own father. I haven't contacted Grace once since she asked me to leave. I've given her exactly the space she requested, but you've been talking to lawyers, haven't you? Planning your next move, building your case against Richard like this is some kind of game you're determined to win. How did she know about James? Had they hired a private investigator? Were they tracking my movements, my phone calls? I've been protecting myself legally, I said carefully, which is what anyone would do when threatened with lawsuits. Threatened? Richard made one phone call expressing his legitimate concerns. And you're calling it a threat? He told me he'd pursue legal action for defamation and business interference. That's the definition of a threat, Mrs. Chen. It's the definition of protecting oneself from slander. Her voice hardened. Here's what's going to happen, David. You're going to stop making accusations. You're going to stay away from Tanaka Hiroshi and any other business contacts of my husband's. And you're going to sign a legal agreement stating that you will not disparage Richard or Chen dynamics in any way to anyone ever or what? Or Richard will sue you for everything you have. And believe me, he has the resources for a very long, very expensive legal battle. Do you? There it was. The real message. Submit or be destroyed. Recant your testimony or face financial ruin. And if I agree to this, if I sign your gag order, then maybe there's a chance for you and Grace to work things out in time after appropriate counseling and a sincere apology to the family. An apology for telling the truth. Counseling to fix whatever was wrong with me that made me incapable of understanding loyalty. A conditional, controlled path back to Grace that required me to pretend I'd been wrong about everything. What if I can't do that? I asked quietly. What if I can't apologize for something I'm not sorry for? Then you're choosing your pride over your wife and you'll have to live with that choice. She hung up. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to dead air. The ultimatum was clear. Truth or grace? Principle or marriage? Pick one because I couldn't have both. James came home early that afternoon. Face grim. I talked to some people. You're right about the blacklisting. Richard's been calling in favors, spreading word that you're unstable, litigious, a liability. He's not making specific accusations, too smart for that. But he's destroying your reputation through innuendo. His wife just called, offered me a deal. Sign a non-disparagement agreement. Never speak about any of this again, and maybe Grace and I can reconcile eventually after I apologize. Jesus Christ, did you agree? I said I'd think about it. David, I know I can't. But James, if I don't, I couldn't finish the sentence. If I don't, I lose her for real. Forever. He sat down heavily. There's something else. Tanaka's investigators filed their report with the relevant regulatory agencies yesterday. Trade Commission, State Attorney General's office. Once those wheels start turning, there's going to be a formal investigation into Chen Dynamics. It's out of your hands now. So, even if I wanted to back down, sign their agreement, pretend none of this happened, it wouldn't matter. The truth is already in motion. Richard's going to be investigated regardless of what you do or don't say, which meant I'd already burned the bridges. The damage was done. Signing a non-disparagement agreement now wouldn't save my marriage or repair my relationship with Grace's family. It would just mean I'd silence myself for nothing. When will Richard find out about the investigation? I asked. Could be any time, could be Monday, could be right now. The thought of him getting that news at tonight's dinner, the celebration dinner, the family gathering meant to show solidarity against outside threats, felt almost poetic, his moment of triumph interrupted by the revelation that the threat wasn't outside at all. It was internal, built into the foundation of everything he'd created. He's going to know it was me, I said. Even if investigators never mention my name, he'll know. I was at the dinner. I spoke to Tanaka. I'm the obvious source. Then you need to be prepared. Restraining order prepared. Security system prepared. Richard Chen doesn't strike me as the kind of man who loses gracefully. The suggestion should have seemed paranoid. Extreme. But something in James' tone made me understand he was serious. He'd seen something in his research. Talked to people who knew Richard's history. Learned things he hadn't shared yet. What did you find? I asked. James opened his laptop, turned it toward me. 2 former employees who tried to blow the whistle on Chen Dynamics practices. Both ended up fired, blacklisted, and interestingly, both had their cars vandalized within weeks of leaving the company. Nothing proven, nothing connected to Richard directly, but the pattern's there. You think he'd actually hurt me? I think he's a man who's built his entire identity on control and success, and you've just taken both away from him. People like that don't just accept loss, they retaliate. I stared at the screen. Photos of smashed windshields, slashed tires, petty crimes that sent a clear message. See what happens when you cross me. I should warn Grace, I said. If her father is capable of, she won't believe you. You know that she'll think you're trying to manipulate her, turn her against Richard out of revenge. He was right. Any warning I sent would be dismissed as paranoia or strategic poisoning. Grace had chosen her side. Nothing I said now would change her mind. Only evidence would do that. Only seeing Richard's true nature herself. And by the time she saw it, it might be too late. The dinner was happening right now. 6 o'clock. I checked my phone obsessively. 6:15. 6:30. Imagining Grace arriving at her parents' house. The warmth of their greeting. The relief of being surrounded by family that supported her. The narrative they'd constructed together. David the outsider who tried to infiltrate their circle but revealed his true nature just in time. 7 o'clock. They'd be sitting down to eat now. Richard at the head of the table probably making a toast to family. To loyalty, to surviving attacks from those who don't understand what it means to build something from nothing. Would Grace think of me? Wonder what I was doing? Feel any doubt at all about the choice she'd made? Or was I already becoming a memory? The husband who almost was, the mistake she'd escaped. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. You have 48 hours to sign the agreement and public apology Helen sent you. Or we move forward with legal action. Your choice, RC. I showed it to James. That's explicit coercion, he said immediately. Save that message. Screenshot it. That's evidence. If this goes to court, everything's evidence now. I said, my whole life is just documentation, proof, screenshots, and recordings and testimony. When did I become someone who lives through legal documents? When you decided to tell the truth to people who profit from lies. 7:30 dinner would be winding down. Maybe they were having dessert. Maybe Richard was talking about future plans. Partnerships that would replace the failed Hiroshi deal. Opportunities that would prove David's sabotage meant nothing in the end. 8 o'clock. My phone rang. Grace. My heart stopped. Started. Raced. I answered on the second ring, trying not to sound desperate. Grace, I need you to hear something. Her voice was strange, tight, controlled, but barely. Dad's been drinking, talking, and he just said something. Something I need you to explain. Background noise. Voices. Her family's dinner still happening. What did he say? He said. She paused. I heard her moving, a door closing, relative quiet. He said he's not worried about Tanaka's complaints because no one will believe a word without proof. And the only person who could actually provide proof is you, and you'll be too busy defending yourself from lawsuits to be credible. My breath caught. Grace, he said it like it was strategy, David. Like he'd planned it. And Mom just nodded. Like they'd discussed this before. Like destroying your credibility was always part of their plan. Her voice cracked. Tell me that's not what I think it is. Tell me my father isn't actually admitting to covering something up. This was it. The crack in her certainty. The first moment of doubt. Grace, where are you right now? In their guest room. Everyone else is still at dinner. Can you leave? Can you come here to James' place so we can talk? I can't just walk out of family dinner. They'd David, they'd know something was wrong. They'd ask questions, then meet me somewhere else, anywhere. A coffee shop, a parking lot, I don't care. But we need to talk face to face. Not like this. Silence. I could hear her breathing, thinking, wearing with herself. There's a park near my parents' house, she said finally. Oakage, do you know it? I'll find it. 30 minutes. I'll tell them I'm not feeling well, that I need air. Grace, don't say anything yet. Just be there. Okay. She hung up. I looked at James. I need your car. He was already grabbing his keys. Oak Ridge Park was one of those neighborhood spaces that existed more in theory than practice. A few benches, some struggling trees, a playground that looked perpetually abandoned. I got there first, parked under a street light, watched the empty swings move in the wind. 10 minutes later, Grace's car pulled up. She sat there for a while before getting out, like she was gathering courage or reconsidering. But finally, she emerged. She looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I just felt the distance between us more acutely. 3 days of silence had created a chasm that couldn't be measured in feet. She walked to my bench, sat down, but not close, leaving space between us. Tell me I'm wrong, she said. Tell me I misunderstood what he meant. I can't do that. Because you think he's guilty or because you know he is, because I have evidence that proves he is. And your father knows it exists and he's trying to prevent it from being used against him by destroying my credibility first. She closed her eyes. This is my dad, David. The man who taught me to ride a bike, who paid for my college, who walked me down the aisle at our wedding. I know. And that's what makes this so hard, because he's all those things to you. And he's also someone who's built his business on exploiting people who couldn't fight back. The folder you showed me, the one I threw at you, is it real? Every word. And you're sure? You're absolutely certain there's no other explanation? I pulled out my phone, opened the documentation I'd compiled. Not Tanaka's investigator report. She wasn't ready for that yet, but my own account, time-stamped, detailed, showing exactly what was said versus what was translated at that dinner. Read this, I said. Then decide. She took my phone. Read in silence while the wind moved through dying leaves and the swings creaked on their chains. When she finished, she handed back my phone without looking at me. He lied, she said quietly. Right to that man's face multiple times. Yes. And you saw it happen. Understood it in real time. Yes. Why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you say something right then? The question I'd been asking myself for days. Because I was a coward. Because I didn't want to embarrass him in front of a client. Because I thought maybe there was an explanation I wasn't seeing. Because confronting your father-in-law in the middle of a business dinner felt impossible. She nodded slowly, processing. Then when I go back tonight, they're going to ask where I went. What do I tell them? The truth. Which version? That you needed air? That you're not feeling well? That tonight made you think about things you'd rather not think about? I looked at her. Grace, you don't have to decide everything right now. You don't have to choose sides immediately, but you deserve to know the full truth before you commit to defending someone who might not deserve it. He's my father. I know. And I'm your husband, and we're both asking you to trust us. The difference is I can prove what I'm saying. She stood up. I need time. How much? I don't know. More than 3 days, less than forever. She looked at me finally. I still love you. I need you to know that even when I'm so angry I can barely think straight. Even when I hate what you've done to my family, I still love you. But love doesn't fix this. It doesn't make the questions go away. It doesn't tell me who to believe when everyone I trust is saying opposite things. She walked back to her car, got in, sat there for another minute before starting the engine, and then she left. I stayed on that bench long after her tail lights disappeared. The park emptied further into darkness. The street light above me buzzing and flickering, insects dying against the bulb. I'd gotten what I wanted, Grace, Hearing me out. Doubt entering her certainty. So why did it feel like losing? Because doubt wasn't the same as belief. And space wasn't the same as reconciliation. And time might give her perspective. Or it might just give Richard more opportunity to rebuild his story. To explain away everything I'd shown her, to convince her that love meant choosing family over truth. My phone buzzed. James, you okay? Need me to come get you? I looked around the empty park, the playground where children played during daylight, where families gathered and felt safe. Now it was just shadows and wind and the ghost of conversations that changed everything. I'm okay. I texted back. Coming home soon. Home. James's couch. The temporary space I inhabited while waiting to find out if I still had an actual home to return to. I sat there until the cold seeped through my jacket and my hands were numb. Until sitting still became its own form of penance. Then I got up, got in the car, and drove back to the life I'd chosen. The one where truth mattered more than comfort. The one where I had to believe had to that eventually. That choice would be vindicated. If you've ever sacrificed everything for a principle, you know this uncertainty. This horrible anxious wondering if you've made the greatest mistake of your life or the most important decision. All you can do is wait and hope and try to believe that truth eventually wins, even when all the evidence suggests otherwise. The investigation became public knowledge on Monday morning. I woke up on James' couch to 17 missed calls and a text from my mother that simply read, "What on earth is happening?" I pulled up the news on my phone. There it was. Third story down on the local business section. State Attorney General opens investigation into Chen Dynamics Import-Export Company. The article was careful, full of allegedly and according to sources, but the implications were clear. Fraud, misrepresentation, potential criminal charges pending further investigation. Richard's corporate headshot stared back at me from the screen. Professional, confident, the picture of a successful businessman who'd built an empire through hard work and determination. You'd never know from looking at him that he'd systematically exploited dozens of suppliers, that his empire was built on broken contracts and unpaid invoices and leveraged desperation. My phone rang. "Grace, did you know?" Her voice was raw, like she'd been crying. "Did you know this was coming?" I knew Tanaka's investigators had filed reports. I didn't know when they'd moved forward. It's everywhere, David. Every news site, every business page. My principal called this morning. Parents are already asking questions, wondering if it affects the school, if there's a situation they should be concerned about. She paused. One of the second graders asked if my dad was going to jail. "God, Grace. I'm sorry, are you? Because this is what you wanted, isn't it?" My father exposed, humiliated, destroyed. I wanted the truth to come out. I didn't want it to hurt you. Well, it does. It's hurting me very much. Do you know where I am right now? Sitting in my car in the school parking lot because I can't face going inside because everyone knows and everyone's looking at me differently. And I don't even know if my father actually did what they're saying or if this is all some horrible mistake. Grace, I went through his office last night. After I got back from the park, everyone was asleep and I went into his home office and started looking through files. Her voice dropped. I found things. David correspondence with suppliers. Emails where he's disputing charges claiming quality issues that don't match the photos he received. Spreadsheets with 2 sets of numbers. One for auditors, one labeled internal only. My chest tightened. "What did you do?" "I took pictures of everything. Then I put it all back exactly how I found it and went to bed and pretended to be asleep when I heard him get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to make phone calls." She was crying now, trying to hide it and failing. "He's my dad. He's my dad and he's been lying. Maybe for years, maybe forever. And I helped him. I defended him against you. I told you that you were wrong, that you were jealous and vindictive. And the whole time you didn't know. You couldn't have known. But I should have. Shouldn't I? I should have seen something. Some sign that the man who raised me was capable of this. But I didn't. Because I didn't want to. Because it was easier to believe you were the problem than to accept that my entire childhood was built on fraud. I wanted to hold her. Wanted to drive across the city and pull her into my arms and tell her it would be okay. But I didn't know if that was true. And I didn't know if she'd want me there. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know. I can't turn him in. He's my father. But I can't pretend I don't know either. So, I'm just sitting here paralyzed. While my students are probably inside wondering where their teacher is and why she looks like she's been crying. Grace, listen to me. You're not responsible for your father's choices. His actions are his own. The only thing you're responsible for is deciding what you're going to do now that you know the truth. And what's the right choice, David? Tell me, because every option feels like betrayal. If I support him, I'm complicit. If I don't, I'm abandoning my family. If I stay silent, I'm a coward. If I speak up, I'm a traitor. So, please tell me what's the right choice. I didn't have an answer because there wasn't one. There was no path forward that didn't involve pain, loss, impossible decisions. That was the cost of truth. Not just discovering it, but living with it afterward. I can't tell you what to do, I said finally. But I can tell you this. Whatever you decide, I'm here. I'm still your husband. I still love you, and nothing that's happening changes that. She was quiet for a long time. Then I have to go. I can't keep my students waiting. Grace, I'll call you later. Maybe. I don't know. She hung up. I sat there on James' couch holding my phone, feeling the weight of everything we'd set in motion. The investigation, the exposure, the truth that was supposed to set people free, but mostly just broke things. The week became a blur of damage control and mounting chaos. Richard hired a crisis management firm. Within days, they'd planted stories questioning Tanaka's motives, suggesting business rivalry and competitive sabotage. They dug up dirt on one of the suppliers who testified against Chen Dynamics, a tax issue from years ago. Completely unrelated, but packaged to look suspicious. They built a narrative of Richard as victim, a successful immigrant entrepreneur being targeted by jealous competitors and overzealous regulators. And it was working, at least partially. Comment sections filled with people defending him, questioning the timing of the investigation, suggesting this was politically motivated. The court of public opinion was evenly divided, which meant Richard's strategy was effective. Create enough doubt, muddy enough waters, and truth becomes just another perspective. My own situation deteriorated further. 2 more clients terminated their contracts. One explicitly cited the controversies surrounding my name. The other just said they were going in a different direction, but the timing was unmistakable. Richard's blacklisting campaign was systematic and effective. James filed paperwork for a restraining order based on the threatening text and evidence of business interference. We knew it probably wouldn't be granted. Not enough explicit threat. Too much plausible deniability, but it created a paper trail documentation of harassment protection if things escalated. Wednesday afternoon, I got a call from Detective Sarah Martinez with the Economic Crimes Unit. She wanted to interview me about my observations at the dinner with Tanaka. You understand this is voluntary? She said when we met at a coffee shop downtown. She was younger than I expected, sharp-eyed, professional. You're not under investigation, but your testimony could be valuable to our case. I understand. She pulled out a recorder. Do you consent to being recorded? Yes. So, I told her everything again. The dinner, the mistranslations, what I'd heard versus what Richard had claimed. She took notes, asked clarifying questions, occasionally stopped the recording to explain what she could and couldn't tell me about the ongoing investigation. Off the record, she said after we finished. You did the right thing coming forward. Cases like this white-collar fraud, exploitation of language barriers, they're hard to prosecute because the victims are often overseas, don't have resources to testify, or are afraid of retaliation. Having a credible witness with direct knowledge changes everything. My wife doesn't think I did the right thing. Your wife is in an impossible position. Give her time. Everyone kept saying that. Give her time. Like time was a healing force rather than just empty space where Richard could rebuild his defenses and Grace could talk herself into believing her father's version of events. How long will the investigation take? I asked. Months. Maybe longer. Cases like this are complex, multiple jurisdictions, international witnesses, financial records that need forensic accounting. Mr. Chen has excellent lawyers who will fight every subpoena, challenge every piece of evidence. This won't be quick. Months, potentially years of living in limbo, my life on hold while investigators sifted through documents and Richard's legal team filed motion after motion to delay and obfuscate. What happens if they find him guilty? Depends on the charges. Fraud, breach of contract, potentially criminal charges if we can prove intent. He could face fines, restitution, possibly prison time. She closed her notebook, but that's a long way off. Right now, we're just gathering evidence. I left the coffee shop feeling hollow. I'd given my testimony, done my civic duty, participated in the machinery of justice, and it felt like nothing, like throwing stones at a mountain and hoping for erosion. Thursday evening, Grace finally called. Can you meet me? She asked. No preamble, no small talk. Our apartment. I need to get some things, and I'd rather not be alone. Of course. When? Now, I was there in 20 minutes. Our apartment. Our apartment. Though it felt more like a museum of a life I used to have looked exactly the same. The dishes I'd left in the sink were washed and put away. Grace had been living here, maintaining things, existing in spaces we used to share. She was sitting on the couch when I arrived, looking small and exhausted. "Hey," I said. "Hey." We stood there in awkward silence for a moment. Then she said, "My parents want me to file for divorce." The words hit like a physical blow. "What?" "They sat me down last night. Both of them very serious, very concerned. They said you're clearly unstable. That you've shown you're willing to destroy family for personal gain, that staying married to you would be enabling your behavior." She looked at me. "Mom said she'd been worried about you from the beginning, that she always sensed something off, something she couldn't quite name. Now she feels validated. And what do you think? I think I don't recognize my life anymore. I think 3 weeks ago, I was a happily married second-grade teacher with a normal family and normal problems. And now my father's under criminal investigation. My husband's been driven out of our home and I'm being asked to choose between the two men I love most in the world." She started crying. Not the angry tears from before, but something deeper. Grief. The kind that comes from losing innocence. From discovering that the foundations you built your life on were actually quicksand. I sat down next to her. Not touching, just present. "I don't want a divorce," she said. "I want things to go back to how they were. I want none of this to be real. I want to wake up and have it be 3 weeks ago and make different choices that lead somewhere else." "What different choices?" "I don't know. Maybe you don't go to that dinner. Maybe I never asked you to. Maybe we just exist in happy ignorance forever. You think you could have been happy not knowing?" She wiped her eyes. "I think I was happier not knowing. Doesn't that make me a coward? It makes you human." We sat there in silence for a while. The apartment was too quiet, missing the sounds of normal life, TV in the background, dinner cooking, the unconscious noises of two people coexisting comfortably. "I went to see a lawyer," Grace said finally. "Not for divorce, just to understand my options, what I might be liable for if Dad's business collapses, whether creditors could come after family assets. And she said that unless I'm directly involved in the business, which I'm not, I'm probably protected. But she also said that if it comes out I knew about illegal activities and didn't report them, I could be charged with obstruction." She turned to look at me. "David, I took pictures of incriminating documents and I haven't done anything with them. Am I breaking the law? Am I committing a crime by not turning over evidence?" I didn't know. I wasn't a lawyer. But I knew that Grace was trapped in exactly the nightmare I'd hoped to prevent caught. Between loyalty and law, family and ethics, love and integrity. "You should talk to James," I said. "He'd know better than me. Your brother hates my father. My brother believes in justice. That's not the same as hate." She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapped her arms around them. Small, defensive, trying to make herself smaller, like maybe she could disappear into the couch cushions. "There's something else," she said. "Dad came to my classroom yesterday during my lunch break. He'd never done that before. Come to my school. I mean, he always said teachers needed their professional space respected. What did he want? He asked if you'd contacted me, if you'd tried to convince me to testify against him or provide evidence. When I said we'd barely spoken, he seemed relieved, but also suspicious, like he didn't quite believe me." She paused. Then he said something strange. He said, "Your loyalty to family is being tested right now. Everyone will understand if you make the wrong choice. But I won't. I won't understand and I won't forgive." A chill ran down my spine. "He threatened you." "He didn't threaten. He just made his expectations clear." "Grace, that's a threat. That's explicitly threatening you with consequences if you don't support him unconditionally. He's my father. He's scared and lashing out. He's a man under investigation for fraud who's trying to intimidate potential witnesses, including his own daughter." She stood up abruptly. "I need to pack some things. Are you going to help me or lecture me about my father's character?" I stood too. "I'm sorry. I'll help." We went to the bedroom. She pulled a suitcase from the closet, the one we'd used for our honeymoon, covered in tags from airports. We'd been excited to see together and started filling it with clothes. Methodical, mechanical, like this was just another task to complete rather than the dismantling of our shared life. "Where are you going?" I asked. "Friend's place. Emily from school. She has a spare room and she's not asking questions I can't answer." "You're not going back to your parents?" "I can't. Not right now. Being in that house, seeing Dad pretend everything's fine, watching Mom defend him like he's the victim. I can't do it." She moved to the bathroom, collected toiletries. I stood in the doorway watching her, memorizing the way she moved through spaces we'd shared. The efficiency of someone who knew exactly where everything was because she'd organized it because this was her home. "Do you think we'll survive this?" I asked. She stopped packing, Stood there with her toothbrush in one hand, travel case in the other. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I want to. I'm choosing to leave my parents' house and stay with Emily instead of filing for divorce. So, that's something. But I also can't promise you that I won't wake up tomorrow and decide this is all too much. That loving you isn't worth losing my entire family over. I understand. Do you?" She turned to face me. "Do you really understand what you're asking me to sacrifice? Because it's not just Dad. It's Mom, my aunts and uncles, my cousins. It's every family gathering for the rest of my life, every holiday, every birthday. It's my entire support system. If I choose you, I lose all of them. And I don't know if I'm strong enough for that. You're the strongest person I know. Strength isn't the same as willingness to suffer." She finished packing, zipped the suitcase. "I need time, David. Real time, not days, maybe weeks, maybe longer. Time to figure out who my father actually is and what that means for who I am. Time to decide if our marriage can survive. Both of us making impossible choices. Take whatever time you need." She wheeled the suitcase to the door, then stopped, turned back, crossed the space between us, and kissed me. It was brief, sad, tasting like tears and goodbye. "I still love you," she whispered. "I need you to know that. Even when I'm angry, even when I hate what's happening, even when I'm not sure we can make this work, I still love you. I love you, too." She left. I heard her footsteps in the hallway, the elevator ding, the silence that followed. I stood in our apartment, my apartment now, I supposed at least temporarily, and looked at the spaces she'd occupied. The indent in the couch where she always sat, the coffee mug still in the sink from this morning, the framed photo on the bookshelf of our wedding day. Both of us laughing at something the photographer had said, completely unaware of what was coming. My phone buzzed. "James, how'd it go?" "She's gone." I typed. "Staying with a friend. Needs time." That's not the worst outcome. Maybe not. But it felt pretty close. I sat down on the couch in the exact spot Grace always occupied. Tried to understand how I'd gotten here. How doing the right thing had cost me everything. How truth, which was supposed to be redemptive and freeing, mostly just felt like punishment. If you've ever been left alone with your principles, you know how cold they are, how abstract, how they don't keep you warm at night or tell you everything will be okay. How they're poor substitutes for the people you've lost in service of them. I pulled out my phone, opened my photos, scrolled through pictures of better days. Grace and me at the beach last summer. Grace and me at her school's holiday party. Grace and me in our kitchen. Her teaching me to make her grandmother's recipe while I pretended to be competent. Evidence of a life that might be over. A marriage that might not survive the weight of truth. Outside, the city continued its evening routines. People coming home from work, making dinner, settling into ordinary lives unmarked by investigations and impossible choices. Normal people doing normal things, unaware of how fragile it all was, how quickly it could unravel if you discovered something you weren't supposed to know. I sat there until the apartment grew dark around me. Didn't bother turning on lights. Just existed in the shadows of a life I wasn't sure how to live anymore. The investigation would continue. Richard would fight. Grace would struggle. And I would wait alone, hoping that eventually truth would prove worth its cost. Hoping, but not certain. Never certain anymore. 3 weeks passed like slow motion drowning. I developed routines that felt like survival mechanisms. Wake up at 6. Coffee. Stare at my laptop pretending to work. Field increasingly hostile emails from former clients who decided I was too controversial to associate with. Lunch that I barely ate. More pretend work. Evening calls with James where we talked about the investigation's progress or lack thereof. Sleep that came in fragments, interrupted by dreams of Grace walking away over and over in different scenarios. The apartment echoed. That's the thing about spaces designed for two people. They amplify emptiness when there's only one. I'd catch myself making enough coffee for both of us. Setting out 2 plates before remembering. Muscle memory of a shared life that my brain hadn't fully accepted was gone. Grace texted occasionally. Brief updates that felt more like status reports than conversation. Still at Emily's. Doing okay. Talked to a therapist today. It helped. Please don't call. I'll reach out when I'm ready. Each message was both relief and rejection. She was alive, functioning, not giving up entirely. But she wasn't coming back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The investigation ground forward with bureaucratic slowness. Detective Martinez called every few days with updates that mostly consisted of, "We're still gathering evidence, and these things take time." Tanaka's legal team had provided extensive documentation. Other suppliers were coming forward now that the investigation was public, emboldened by safety and numbers. The case against Richard was building, brick by damning brick, but building wasn't the same as resolved. And in the meantime, Richard was free, operating his business, maintaining his reputation, systematically destroying mine. I'd lost 5 clients now, more than half my active contracts. The ones who remained were loyal but nervous, constantly asking if I was okay in ways that suggested they were waiting for me to become unstable or unreliable. I'd become a liability, a risk. The consultant had gotten tangled up in a high-profile fraud investigation and couldn't be trusted to focus on their marketing strategies. Money was becoming a problem. Real problem. I'd burned through my savings, paying for a lawyer to review the non-disparagement agreement Richard's team had sent, which my lawyer had advised I absolutely not sign. Now, I was looking at credit card debt and wondering how long I could afford this apartment by myself if Grace didn't come back. James had offered to cover rent. I'd refused. Too proud or too stupid to accept help that felt like admission of complete failure. On a Thursday morning, 4 weeks after Grace had packed her suitcase, my mother showed up at my door unannounced. "You look terrible," she said by way of greeting, pushing past me into the apartment. "Good morning to you, too, Mom." She set her purse down, immediately started tidying, picking up empty coffee cups, straightening magazines I hadn't read. My mother's stress response was cleaning. Always had been. When Dad died, she deep cleaned their entire house twice before the funeral. James told me what happened. She said the real version, not the sanitized one you gave me on the phone. "I didn't want to worry you." "Well, I'm worried. You've lost weight. This place looks like a depression nest. And according to your brother, you're being systematically blacklisted by your father-in-law." I sat down at the kitchen table. "It's under control." "Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're drowning and too stubborn to grab the life preserver." She was right. Of course, mothers usually are. But admitting it felt like defeat. "What do you want me to say, Mom? That I made a mistake? That I should have kept quiet?" She stopped cleaning. Came to sit across from me. "I want you to tell me if you're okay. Actually okay. Not the version you think I want to hear." The question broke something. Maybe because she asked it without judgment. Maybe because I was too tired to maintain the facade anymore. "No," I said, "I'm not okay. My wife's gone. My career's imploding. I did the right thing and it's cost me everything that matters, and I don't know if it was worth it." She reached across the table, took my hand. "Do you believe what Richard Chen did was wrong?" "Yes." "Do you believe those suppliers deserve justice?" "Yes." "Do you believe Grace deserved to know the truth about her father?" I hesitated. I believe she deserved the choice to know. I'm not sure anymore if I had the right to force that choice on her. Life forces choices on us all the time, sweetheart. The question isn't whether you had the right. It's whether you could have lived with yourself if you'd stayed silent. Could I have? That was the haunting question. In some alternate timeline where I'd kept my mouth shut, where I'd sat through that dinner and pretended I didn't understand, where I'd smiled and nodded and let Richard continue his fraud, could that version of me have been happy? "I don't know," I said honestly. "Well, I do. You couldn't have, because you're your father's son, and that man never met a truth he could leave alone, even when it would have been easier." She squeezed my hand. He drove me crazy sometimes with his rigid ethics. But I always knew where I stood with him. Always knew he wouldn't compromise his integrity for convenience or comfort. Dad had been a professor, philosophy, spent his entire career teaching about moral frameworks and ethical decision-making. Died of a heart attack when I was 25, arguing with the department head about academic honesty violations the administration wanted to ignore. Dad died fighting a battle that didn't need fighting. I said he could have let the plagiarism thing go. Let someone else handle it, but he couldn't, and it literally killed him. Maybe. Or maybe that heart attack was coming anyway and at least he went out standing for something. She pulled back, started clearing more coffee cups. "You want my advice? Do I have a choice? No. Here it is. Stop waiting. Stop sitting in this apartment hoping Grace will come back, hoping Richard will face consequences, hoping everything will magically resolve itself. Start living again. Whatever that looks like. I don't know what that looks like anymore. Then figure it out. Get a new client. Join a gym. Volunteer somewhere. Do something that reminds you that you're still a person with value beyond this nightmare you're trapped in." She stayed for 3 hours, cleaned the entire apartment while lecturing me about self-care and resilience and how wallowing was unproductive. By the time she left, the place looked almost habitable, and I felt marginally less like I was dissolving into the furniture. "I love you," she said at the door. "Even when you're being impossibly stubborn. Love you, too, Mom." After she left, I looked around the clean apartment. She was right about the wallowing. I'd been existing in a holding pattern, waiting for external validation that I'd done the right thing. Waiting for Grace to come back and say I was forgiven. Waiting for Richard to be arrested and the universe to confirm that truth and justice prevailed. But life didn't work that way. Justice was slow and uncertain. Grace might never come back. And waiting for external validation was just another form of giving away my power. I pulled out my laptop, started drafting emails to potential clients I'd been too defeated to pursue, updated my portfolio, did the work of rebuilding that I'd been avoiding because it felt like admitting the damage was permanent. Maybe it was permanent. Maybe this was just what my life looked like now. But I could either accept that and adapt or keep drowning in what used to be. I chose adaptation. 2 days later, Grace called. Actually called, not texted. "Can you talk?" she asked. "Of course, always. I need to tell you something, and I need you to not have a reaction until I'm done explaining." My stomach dropped. This was it. The divorce conversation, the formal ending. "Okay," I said. "I met with Dad yesterday alone at a coffee shop near my school." I bit back the immediate response. "Why would you do that? Is he trying to manipulate you? Did he threaten you again and just waited?" He wanted to explain his side, to tell me that everything being said about him is exaggerated or taken out of context, that he's been a businessman for 20 years, and sometimes hard decisions look bad to outsiders who don't understand the industry. She paused. He was very calm, very reasonable, very convincing. My heart was racing. "Grace, I'm not done." He showed me counter-documentation, financial records that supposedly prove the suppliers are lying about non-payment, emails that he says show he was trying to resolve disputes in good faith, character references from other business partners who swear he's always been ethical and honorable. Those can be faked or taken out of context just like he's accusing others of doing. I know, which is why I recorded the conversation. I stopped breathing. "You what?" I recorded it on my phone. The whole thing. And David, there were moments where his story didn't add up, where he'd say something that contradicted what he'd said 5 minutes earlier, where he'd get defensive about questions that shouldn't have made him defensive if he was really innocent. "What are you going to do with the recording?" "I don't know yet. That's why I'm calling, because I need to know if I turn this over to the investigators. Am I betraying my father? Or am I just refusing to be complicit in his lies?" The question wasn't rhetorical. She genuinely didn't know. Was asking me to help her figure out where the line was between loyalty and complicity, between family and justice. "What does your therapist say?" I asked that I need to decide what I can live with. That both choices have consequences and I'm the only one who can determine which consequences I can bear. That's frustratingly unhelpful, right? She laughed, but it was hollow. "I keep waiting for someone to just tell me what to do, but everyone keeps saying it's my choice, my decision. Like, that makes it easier somehow. Grace, I can't tell you what to do. You know what I think you should do, but that's colored by everything I've been through. You have to make this decision for yourself, but I'm asking your opinion. As my husband, as someone who knows me better than almost anyone, what do you think I should do?" I closed my eyes. This was dangerous territory. If I told her to turn over the recording and she did and it destroyed her relationship with her family, she might blame me forever. If I told her not to, and Richard continued to defraud people, I'd be part of that continuing harm. I think I said carefully that you should ask yourself one question. If your father is innocent, would this recording hurt him? And if he's guilty, can you live with protecting him? Silence on the other end. Long enough that I thought maybe she'd hung up. "He asked about you," she said finally. "Dad. During our conversation, he asked if I was still in contact with you, if you were pressuring me to testify against him. When I said we barely talked, he looked relieved. And then he said something strange." "What?" "He said, David was always weak. I knew from the beginning he didn't have what it takes to be part of this family. I'm just glad you're seeing it now before he could do more damage." The word stung more than I expected. Weak. After everything I'd risked, everything I'd lost, he thought I was weak. "And what did you say?" I asked. I said, "Actually, I think it takes a lot of strength to stand up for what's right, even when it costs you everything." And he looked at me like I'd slapped him. She paused. That's when I knew I had to record the rest of the conversation. Because if he could look at his own daughter with that much contempt, just for suggesting you might have principles worth respecting, what else was he capable of? "Grace, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you're in this position. Don't be sorry. Be honest with me. If our positions were reversed, if it was your parent being investigated and I was the one who'd come forward, would you forgive me? Could you?" The question cut to the heart of everything. Would I? Could I forgive someone for exposing my parents' crimes? Even if those crimes were real, I'd want to think I could, I said. But honestly, I don't know. It's easy to say you'd choose justice over loyalty until you're actually facing that choice. Maybe I'd be exactly where you are now, angry and confused and not sure if doing the right thing is worth losing your family over. That's not the inspiring answer I was hoping for. I know, but it's honest. She sighed. I'm so tired, David. I'm tired of thinking about this. Tired of analyzing every conversation for hidden meanings. Tired of wondering if the man who taught me to ride a bike is secretly a monster. I just want it to be over. I know. Me, too. Do you think we'll survive this? Us? I mean, our marriage. Do you want to? Yes. Most days. Some days I'm not sure. Some days I think it would be easier to just cut my losses, file for divorce, pretend this whole chapter never happened. And what stops you on those days? The fact that I still love you. The fact that you did something impossibly difficult because you believed it was right. The fact that I don't want to become the kind of person who runs away from hard things just because they're hard. She paused. And because I keep thinking about what you said at that park, about how love doesn't fix things, but it matters anyway. And you're right. It doesn't fix this, but it matters. Something loosened in my chest. Not relief exactly, but hope. The first genuine hope I'd felt in weeks. Grace. Whatever you decide to do with that recording, turn it over, delete it. Keep it as insurance. I support you. Not because I have an agenda, but because you deserve to make that choice without pressure from anyone, including me. Even if I choose wrong, there is no wrong choice. There's only the choice you can live with. She was quiet for a moment. Then I'm going to turn it over. Tomorrow I'm going to give Detective Martinez the recording and whatever happens after that is out of my hands. Are you sure? No. But I'm going to do it anyway because you were right about something. If I don't, if I protect him and he continues to hurt people, I become complicit and I can't live with that. Even if it means losing my family, even if it means they never forgive me. Pride swelled in my chest. That's incredibly brave. It doesn't feel brave. It feels terrifying. That's usually what brave feels like. We talked for another hour. Not about Richard or the investigation or the impossible choices we were both facing. Just talked about her students. About a funny thing that happened at Emily's apartment. About a movie she'd watched that made her think of me. Normal conversation that felt like oxygen after weeks of suffocating. When we finally hung up, I sat in the quiet apartment feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly, but something adjacent to it. The possibility of eventual happiness. The distant promise that maybe eventually we'd find our way back to each other. Grace turned over the recording the next day. By evening, it was part of the official investigation file. 2 days later, Richard's lawyer held a press conference, calling the recording an illegal invasion of privacy and a desperate attempt by hostile family members to manufacture evidence. The legal maneuvering had begun in earnest. Richard wasn't going down quietly, but he was going down. I could feel it. Not quickly, not cleanly, but inevitably. Truth was slow, but patient. And grace had just accelerated its arrival. That night, she texted, "Did the right thing. Feels awful. Still glad I did it." I responded, "That's exactly what doing the right thing feels like. Proud of you." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. "Can we have dinner?" "Not at the apartment. Somewhere neutral. I'm not ready to come home yet, but I miss you." "Absolutely. When?" "Tomorrow. 7:00 p.m. that Italian place we went to on our first date. I'll be there." I stared at my phone for a long time after that. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't resolution, but it was movement. Forward motion, the possibility that destruction wasn't the only outcome, that sometimes breaking things apart was necessary before you could rebuild them stronger. If you've ever started to see light at the end of a very long tunnel, you know this feeling. Not relief yet, but hope. Cautious, fragile, desperately needed hope. I had dinner plans with my wife. The investigation was progressing. Richard was fighting, but losing ground. And for the first time in weeks, I could imagine a future that wasn't just survival, but actual living. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot, but maybe possibly. We were past the worst of it. I chose to believe that. Had to believe it because the alternative was unbearable. The Italian restaurant looked exactly the same. Same red awnings, same warm lighting spilling onto the sidewalk, same hand-painted menu board advertising specials in cheerful chalk. 5 years ago, I'd brought Grace here on our first real date. Not the casual coffee that came before, but the deliberate, nervous, please let this go well dinner date. I'd worn a tie I didn't know how to knot properly. She'd laughed at my fumbling explanation of why I'd chosen Italian food, then ordered in flawless menu Italian that made me fall a little bit in love right there. Now, I stood outside that same restaurant 5 years and a lifetime later, wondering if we were about to have our last meal together or our first step back. She arrived exactly at 7 o'clock. Grace was never late. One of the things I loved about her reliability in a world that felt increasingly chaotic. She wore a navy dress I recognized. Her hair pulled back in a way that meant she'd spent time deciding how to look. Not too casual, not too formal. The careful calibration of someone who didn't know what this evening meant either. "Hi," she said. "Hi." We stood there on the sidewalk. Two people who'd shared a bed and a life and dreams about the future. Suddenly, strangers navigating the basic mechanics of greeting. Do we hug, kiss, shake hands like business associates? She solved it by stepping forward and wrapping her arms around me. Brief, tight. A hug that said, "I've missed you and I'm still angry and I don't know what we're doing all at once." "You made a reservation?" she asked when she pulled back. "Under Morrison, our table's ready." Inside, the hostess led us to a corner booth, the same booth where we'd sat 5 years ago. Though I hadn't requested it. Just luck or the universe's sense of irony. We sat, ordered wine neither of us would drink much of. Studied menus we'd already memorized. "How's Emily's place?" I asked when the silence stretched too long. "Fine. She's been amazing. Very patient with me crying at random times or rage cleaning her kitchen at 2 in the morning." Grace sat down her menu. "David, can we just not do small talk? I don't have the energy for pretending this is a normal dinner." "Okay. What do you want to talk about?" "Everything?" "Nothing. I don't know." She folded her hands on the table. "Tell me how you're doing." "Actually doing. Not the version you'd tell someone you're trying not to worry." So I told her about the lost clients, the financial stress, the way I'd been existing rather than living. About my mother showing up and forcing me to clean the apartment and rejoin the world. About the daily grind of giving testimony to investigators while watching Richard's PR machine paint me as unstable and vindictive. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "I didn't know it was that bad. The client situation. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were dealing with your own crisis. Because I didn't want to add to your burden. Because." I paused. "Because I was ashamed. Maybe that doing the right thing had cost me so much professionally." "It's not your fault. Richard is vindictive, isn't it?" I knew what he was capable of. I saw how he operated and I still chose to expose him knowing there'd be consequences. Consequences for telling the truth. That's not the same as fault. The wine arrived. We both took sips we didn't taste. Buying time. I listened to the recording again last night. Grace said the one with my dad. Really listen this time. Not just while I was recording. And David, there were so many lies, so many careful manipulations. He'd tell me something sympathetic to get me on his side, then 2 minutes later contradict it, then circle back and act like he'd never said the first thing. "Grace, let me finish. Please." She took a breath. There's a moment about halfway through where I ask him directly. "Did you deliberately mistranslate Tanaka's questions?" And you know what he says? He says, "Your husband has always been jealous of my success. He saw an opportunity to make me look bad and he took it." Not denial, not explanation, just deflection. Like the question itself was offensive. That's a classic technique. Redirect and accuse. Make the questioner defensive so they stop asking. I know that now, but in the moment it worked. I felt guilty for asking, like I was betraying him just by questioning. She looked at me. "How did you see through him so quickly? How did you know?" I didn't know at first. I just noticed inconsistencies. Then I looked closer and found more. Then I couldn't unsee it. And that's what I'm dealing with now. I can't unsee it anymore. Every childhood memory is filtered through this new lens. Was he genuinely proud of me at my college graduation, or was he performing for the audience? Did he really support my teaching career? Or did he just tolerate it because it made him look like a good father? I don't know what was real anymore. The waiter appeared to take our order. We chose things at random. Neither of us actually hungry. When he left, Grace continued, "My mom called this morning. She knows I gave the recording to the investigators. Dad told her. She said, I've chosen a side and I chose wrong. That I'm betraying family for a man who's manipulated me into doubting my own father. She said, if I don't recant, if I don't claim the recording was taken out of context or admit I misunderstood what I heard, I'm no longer welcome at family gatherings." My chest tightened. "Grace, I'm so sorry. Don't be." It clarified something for me. She didn't ask if the recording showed anything incriminating. Didn't ask if Dad was telling the truth. Just demanded loyalty without question. And I realized that's not love. That's not family. That's just control. Conditional acceptance based on blind obedience. She was crying now. Quiet tears. She didn't bother wiping away. I lost my family, David. I lost them because I chose truth over loyalty. And they see that as betrayal. And the worst part, I'm not sure I made the wrong choice. Which makes me feel like a terrible daughter. What kind of person doesn't regret losing their parents? The kind of person who realizes that keeping them meant losing herself. Is that what you tell yourself when you think about what this has cost us? Every single day, our food arrived. We pushed it around our plates pretending to eat. Detective Martinez called me yesterday. Grace said the recording is significant, that it shows consciousness of guilt. Dad knowing he needs to manipulate the narrative means he knows there's something to hide. Combined with everything else they found, she thinks they'll have enough for formal charges within a month. How do you feel about that? Relieved? Sick? Both. She set down her fork. There's a part of me that still wants him to somehow be innocent. To have an explanation that makes everything okay, but I know that's not going to happen. The man I thought he was doesn't exist. Maybe never existed. And I'm mourning someone who was always just a performance. I reached across the table. She let me take her hand. You're one of the strongest people I know. I said, I don't feel strong. I feel broken. Broken and strong aren't mutually exclusive. Sometimes strength is just surviving the breaking. We sat like that for a while, hands linked across pasta. Neither of us was eating. Two people trying to figure out how to rebuild something that felt irreparably damaged. I want to come home, Grace said suddenly. Not tonight. I'm not ready for that yet, but soon. Maybe next week. If you'll have me, of course I'll have you. It's your home, too, is it? After everything, after I threw you out, accused you of betrayal, chose my father over you. You didn't choose him. You chose to get space to figure out the truth. That's not the same thing. It felt the same to you. I bet it hurt, but I understood. And I never stopped hoping you'd come back. She squeezed my hand. I can't promise it'll be easy. I'm still angry sometimes. Still grieving. Still having moments where I resent you for being the one who made me see the truth. I know, but I love you, and I don't want to lose you on top of everything else I'm losing. You won't. I'm right here. I've been here the whole time. We left the restaurant around 9 o'clock, full of wine and unfinished pasta and something that felt like tentative hope. Grace walked me to my car, then leaned against it, looking up at the night sky. Do you remember our first date here? She asked. You ordered an Italian and made me realize I was completely out of my depth. You were so nervous. It was adorable. You kept adjusting your tie and apologizing for things that didn't need apologies. I really wanted to impress you. You did. Not with the tie, that was a disaster, by the way, but with how genuinely you listened, how you asked real questions and cared about the answers. I remember thinking, this is someone I could build a life with. And did we build a life? She looked at me. We're building something. Maybe not what we originally planned. Maybe better, maybe worse. But something real. She kissed me then. Soft, tentative, tasting like wine and salt and new beginnings. When she pulled back, she said, I should go. Emily's probably wondering where I am. Text me when you get there. I will. I watched her drive away. Tail lights disappearing into traffic and felt something shift. Not resolution, but movement. Forward motion. The possibility that destruction wasn't permanent. That sometimes you had to break things apart before you could build them stronger. My phone buzzed. James, how'd it go? Good. Really good. She's coming home soon. That's great, man. Proud of both of you. I drove back to the apartment with the windows down, letting cold air rush through, feeling more alive than I had in weeks. The investigation was progressing. Grace was coming back. Richard was fighting, but losing. Things were still messy, still complicated. But they were moving in the right direction. When I got home, there was an envelope taped to my door. No postage, no return address, hand delivered. I took it inside, opened it carefully. Inside was a single piece of paper. Printed, not handwritten. A message in block letters. You've made a powerful enemy. Some people don't forgive. Some people don't forget. Watch your back. My blood ran cold. I called James immediately. Someone left a threat at my door. What kind of threat? I read him the message. Okay, don't touch the paper anymore. Fingerprints. Call the police. File a report. Then call Detective Martinez. Let her know. This is witness intimidation and it's serious. You think it's from Richard? Who else would it be? David, you need to take this seriously. Get security cameras for your door. Maybe stay with me for a few days until I'm not running. I'm not letting him intimidate me into hiding. This isn't about machismo. It's about safety. If Richard's desperate enough to send threats, don't know it's from Richard. Could be anyone, right? Could be the Tooth Fairy. Use your head, David. The man's under investigation. His daughter just turned over evidence against him. His business is collapsing. He's cornered. And cornered animals are dangerous. He was right. I knew he was right. But accepting that Richard might actually be dangerous, might actually hurt me physically, not just professionally, meant accepting that this situation had escalated beyond legal maneuvering into something darker. I took photos of the note, the envelope, exactly where it had been placed. Then I called the police. 2 officers showed up 40 minutes later. Young, professional, took statements and photos and told me they'd file a report. We'll increase patrols in the area, one said. And you should consider a security system. Ring doorbell, cameras, that kind of thing. After they left, I called Detective Martinez, got her voicemail, left a message. Then I sat on my couch staring at the door, wondering who'd stood there, who'd known where I lived, who'd wanted me scared enough to deliver a threat in person. My phone buzzed. Grace, made it to Emily's. Thank you for tonight. It meant everything. I stared at the message. Should I tell her about the threat? Would it scare her? Make her reconsider coming home? Or was not telling her another form of manipulation? Another way of controlling information to protect her feelings? I typed, meant to me, too. Listen, something happened after you left. Someone left a threatening note at my door. Police are involved. I'm okay, but I wanted you to know. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then what? Are you safe? Should I come there? I'm safe. Building's secure. Just thought you should know. Might be nothing. Or it might be my father. David, this is serious. You can't stay there alone. I'm not running. I'm not asking you to run. I'm asking you to be smart. Can you go to James at least for tonight? I looked around my apartment. The clean space my mother had helped restore. The life I was trying to rebuild. The home I'd invited Grace back to. Okay, I'll go to James just for tonight. Thank you. I'll call you in the morning. Please be careful. I packed a bag again. Always packing bags lately. Moving between temporary spaces. Never quite settled. I took one last look at the apartment before leaving the photos on the shelves. The books we'd collected, the evidence of a shared life that felt increasingly fragile. Then I locked the door, got in my car, and drove to my brother's place for the second time in a month. James had the couch already made up when I arrived. This is becoming a habit, he said. Not by choice. I know, but David, you need to take this seriously. Richard Chen is not just unethical, he's vindictive, and now he's desperate. That's a dangerous combination. So what am I supposed to do? Hide? Move? Let him win by default because I'm too scared to live my own life. I'm saying you prepare. You protect yourself. You don't give him opportunities. I dropped my bag. Sat heavily on the couch. Grace is supposed to come home next week. How do I bring her back to an apartment that's been threatened? How do I ask her to feel safe there? You install security. You stay vigilant. You do what you need to do to actually be safe, not just feel brave. He was right. Again. James was annoyingly always right. I'll call a security company tomorrow. I said cameras, new locks, whatever they recommend. Good. And David, you should tell Grace everything. Don't protect her from information she needs to stay safe. Trust her to handle it. When did you become the relationship expert? When my little brother started choosing martyrdom over honest communication. I threw a pillow at him. He caught it, laughed, tossed it back. It's going to be okay, he said. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. You're doing the right thing. Even when it's hard. That has to count for something, does it? Because from where I'm sitting, doing the right thing has cost me my career, my marriage, almost my safety. At what point does the cost outweigh the principle? When you can look at yourself in the mirror and feel okay about staying silent, which you couldn't, which is why you're here. I lay back on the couch that was too short for my frame. Staring at the ceiling in my brother's apartment for the second time in a month. Outside, the city hummed with normal life. People going home, watching TV, making love, having normal problems that didn't involve federal investigations and threatening letters, living lives unmarked by impossible choices and their consequences. I envied them. God, I envied them. But I wouldn't trade places. Couldn't. Because even now, even scared and financially struggling and threatened, I knew I'd made the right choice. The only choice I could live with. Even if living with it meant sleeping on my brother's couch with a threatening letter logged as evidence with the police. Even if it meant installing cameras and checking over my shoulder and wondering if every footstep behind me was danger. Even if it meant accepting that sometimes the cost of integrity was higher than you ever imagined paying. If you've ever stood at the intersection of principle and price, you know this feeling. The certainty that you'd do it all again, mixed with the desperate wish that you didn't have to. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow, I'd install security systems and call Detective Martinez and tell Grace the full truth about the threat and her father's escalation. Tomorrow, I'd keep building the case, keep protecting myself, keep moving forward. But tonight, I just tried to rest. Tried and mostly failed because peace was hard to find when you declared war on someone who fought dirty and fought to win. And Richard Chen was nothing if not a fighter. The security company arrived Monday morning at 8, sharp, 2 technicians, one older, graying, with the methodical movements of someone who'd seen everything. One younger, eager, explaining every detail like I was studying for a test. They installed cameras at the front door, the back entrance, the parking garage, motion sensors, new locks with digital codes, a system that would alert my phone if anyone approached within 10 feet of my door. Overkill? The older tech asked, reading my expression. I don't know anymore. What's overkill when someone's already threatened you? This ain't overkill. This is what everyone should have. He showed me the app, how to review footage, how to set alerts. Someone comes near your door now, you'll know. They try the handle, you'll know. They breathe wrong, you'll know. That's reassuring, I think. After they left, I sat in my apartment, my secure, surveilled, fortress-like apartment, and felt both safer and more paranoid. Every sound made me check my phone. Every footstep in the hallway triggered a spike of adrenaline. I'd become someone who flinched at shadows. Grace came by around noon. I told her about the security installation, expected her to be relieved. Instead, she looked haunted. This is because of my father, she said, staring at the camera above the door. You're living in fear because I'm related to a man who threatens people. You're not responsible for his choices, aren't I? If I'd seen what he was earlier, if I'd questioned things instead of blindly accepting, Grace, no, you can't rewrite history like that. You trusted your parent. That's not a character flaw. That's being human. She moved through the apartment like she was seeing it for the first time, touching familiar objects, the books on our shelves, the photos on the walls, the coffee maker we'd picked out together, reacquainting herself with a space that had been ours but was now just mine, at least temporarily. Can I stay tonight? She asked suddenly. Not moving back yet. Just I want to sleep in our bed. I want to wake up next to you just for one night before I have to go back to Emily's and keep pretending I'm okay. You don't have to pretend here. I know. That's why I'm asking. So, she stayed. We ordered takeout neither of us finished. Watched a movie neither of us paid attention to existed in the same space. Relearning how to be together without the weight of crisis forcing every interaction. That night, lying in bed with Grace curled against me, her breathing evening out into sleep, I checked my phone one last time. The security app showed the empty hallway, the quiet parking garage, the world continuing its normal rhythms while ours remained fractured. No threats, no visitors, no Richard Chen lurking in shadows. Maybe the note had been his last desperate move. Maybe the security was working as a deterrent. Maybe I could actually sleep without jumping at every sound. I was wrong about all of it. Tuesday morning, Detective Martinez called while Grace was in the shower. We're filing formal charges, she said without preamble. Wire fraud, contract fraud, multiple counts. The DA's office is confident enough in the case to move forward. My heart raced. When? Warrant goes out this afternoon. We'll execute it tomorrow morning. Wanted to give you a heads up in case Chen's people come after you with accusations of cooperation. Grace is here with me. She should know. Agreed. But David, be prepared. This is going to get ugly. Chen's lawyers will fight every charge. His PR team will go into overdrive. And he's going to blame everyone involved, especially you and his daughter. We're prepared. Are you? Because preparation means understanding that this man might do more than send threatening letters. Cornered animals don't just run. Sometimes they attack. The warning hung in the air after we disconnected. Cornered animals. Richard had money, connections, resources, and now he had nothing left to lose. When Grace emerged from the bathroom, towel drying her hair, wearing my t-shirt, looking momentarily normal, I knew I had to tell her. No more protective omissions. No more filtering information to spare her feelings. That was Detective Martinez. I said they're filing charges. Tomorrow morning. She froze mid-motion. Towel suspended. Tomorrow, formal arrest, wire fraud, contract fraud, multiple counts. She sat down slowly on the bed. It's really happening. I knew it was coming, but hearing it said out loud, Grace, there's something else. Martinez thinks your father might escalate. That the threat I received might not be the end of it. What are you saying? I'm saying we need to be careful. Both of us. Maybe you shouldn't be alone right now. Maybe you should stay here where there's security rather than going back to Emily's. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. You think my father would actually hurt me? His own daughter? I think he's desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. He's not violent, David. He's manipulative, dishonest, ethically bankrupt, but he's not violent. You didn't think he was any of those other things either. Until you did. The words landed harder than I intended. She flinched, looked away. I'm sorry, I said. That was true. It was true. She stood up, started getting dressed. I need to call my mom before she hears it on the news, before she finds out her husband is being arrested and no one in the family warned her. You think she'll listen? Probably not, but I have to try. She made the call from the living room while I pretended not to eavesdrop from the kitchen. I could hear her side of the conversation, quiet at first, then increasingly strained. Mom, please just listen. I know you don't want to hear it, but it's not David's fault because the evidence is real. Mom, he's going to be arrested tomorrow. You need to prepare yourself. Silence. Then Grace's voice, small and broken. I love you too, even if you don't believe me right now. She came back to the kitchen with tear-streaked cheeks. She hung up on me, said I was being dramatic, that this is all a witch hunt, that Dad's lawyers will handle it, and I should be supporting him instead of spreading panic. I pulled her into a hug. She collapsed against me, crying the way she'd been holding back, full, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. I tried, she gasped. I tried to warn her, to prepare her, and she wouldn't listen. You did what you could. Did I? Or did I just make it worse? Now, when it happens, she'll remember that I knew that I tried to tell her. She'll blame me for not doing more, or for doing too much, or for existing in the middle of this nightmare. There was nothing I could say to that because she was probably right. Helen Chen would find a way to blame Grace no matter what. That's what people did when they couldn't accept their own complicity. They redirected blame to anyone nearby. Grace pulled back, wiped her eyes. I should go to work. Pretend everything's normal for a few more hours before the world explodes. Are you sure? My students need me, and I need them. They're the only part of my life that still makes sense. She left 20 minutes later, kissed me goodbye at the door, promised to text when she got to school. I watched her on the security camera, walking to her car. Getting in, driving away. Normal morning routines masking extraordinary circumstances. I should have insisted she stay home. Should have known that normal was an illusion we could no longer afford. I should have protected her better. The call came at 10:30. Grace's principal, voice tight with controlled panic. Mr. Morrison, this is Susan Blake from Riverside Elementary. Grace, there's been an incident. She's okay. She's safe, but we need you to come down here immediately. My blood turned to ice. What happened? I'd rather explain in person. Can you come now? I was in the car before she finished the sentence. Riverside Elementary was 15 minutes away. I made it in 8, breaking every speed limit. My mind racing through possibilities. Heart attack, car accident, school shooting, every horrible scenario playing on repeat. The principal met me in the parking lot. She's in my office. She's not hurt, but she's very shaken. What happened? Someone came to her classroom. During instruction, a man we didn't recognize. No visitor badge. Somehow got past security. He walked into her classroom while she was teaching and handed her an envelope, then left before anyone could stop him. What was in the envelope? Photos of Grace at your apartment, at restaurants, in her car, taken over the past few weeks. Susan Blake's expression was grim. Mr. Morrison, your wife has been under surveillance, and whoever's responsible wanted her to know it. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. They led me to the principal's office where Grace sat curled in a chair, pale and trembling. She looked up when I entered, and the fear in her eyes nearly broke me. David, she whispered. He's been watching me, following me. The photos they're everywhere. My apartment, Emily's place, the grocery store, the school parking lot. Everywhere I've been, he's been there. I knelt in front of her, took her hands. They were ice cold. Did you see the person who delivered them? Barely. Older man, maybe 60s. He smiled at me like this was funny. Like scaring me was entertainment. Susan cleared her throat. We've called the police. They're on their way and we've locked down the school as a precaution. But Mr. Morrison, I need to ask, is Grace in danger? Are my students in danger? Because if there's something going on that puts this school at risk, the person responsible is Grace's father, I said. He's being arrested tomorrow on fraud charges. This is his way of retaliating. Her father? Susan looked between us, recalibrating. I knew there was a family situation. Grace mentioned it, but I didn't realize. Neither did I, Grace said wholly. I didn't think he'd actually. I thought the threat to David was posturing. I didn't think he'd follow through. The police arrived. Different officers than the ones who'd come to my apartment, older, more experienced, treating this as the serious crime it was. Stalking, harassment, witness intimidation. They took the photos as evidence, took statements from Grace, from Susan, from the teacher's aide who'd seen the man enter. We're issuing an emergency restraining order, one officer said, against Richard Chen, and any associates. He comes within 500 feet of you, your husband, your workplace, or your home. He's arrested immediately. Can you actually enforce that? Grace asked. He has money, lawyers. He knows how to work around rules. Ma'am, he's about to be arrested on federal fraud charges. He violates a restraining order. That's additional charges. Additional evidence of consciousness, of guilt. His lawyers will tell him to back off unless his lawyers couldn't control him anymore. Unless Richard had moved beyond rational self-interest into pure vindictiveness, we left the school together. Grace couldn't go back to her classroom, couldn't face her students after what had happened, couldn't pretend everything was okay when a strange man had walked into her safe space and shattered it. I drove us back to the apartment, checking mirrors compulsively, looking for cars that followed too closely. Hyper-aware of every vehicle around us. He wanted me to know, Grace said quietly. That's what the photos were about. Not just scaring me, but making sure I understood he's been there, watching that he could have done something worse any time he wanted. The restraining order will stop him. Will it? Or will it just make him more desperate? I didn't have an answer for that. At home, our fortress-like home with cameras and sensors and locks that should have made us safe. We sat on the couch while I pulled up the security footage from the past few days, looking for Richard, looking for evidence he'd been here. And there he was, Tuesday night, 2 days ago, at 3 o'clock in the morning, standing in the parking garage, looking up at our building, not approaching, not doing anything actionable, just standing there, watching, making sure the cameras caught him, making sure we'd eventually see and know he'd been there. Jesus Christ, Grace breathed. He's been here right outside. While I was sleeping, I called Detective Martinez immediately. Sent her the footage. She promised to add it to the case file to use it as evidence of harassment patterns. But the damage was done. The sense of safety, already fragile, was completely shattered. Richard Chen wasn't just fighting legally anymore. He was waging psychological warfare. And we were his primary targets. That night, neither of us slept. We lay in bed, lights on, both of us checking our phones compulsively, Grace monitoring the security cameras, me refreshing news sites, waiting for word that Richard had been arrested, that this was over, that we could breathe again. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. James, checking in. You guys okay? I called him, told him about the photos, the stalking, the escalation. He's coming apart. James said this is endgame behavior. He knows he's finished, so he's trying to take you down with him. He's going after Grace, his own daughter, because in his mind, she's the ultimate betrayal. You're an outsider, expected to be disloyal. But his daughter, choosing truth over him, that's unforgivable. So, what do we do? You survive tomorrow. Get through the arrest. Once he's in custody, once he's processing the reality of criminal charges, the fight might go out of him, or his lawyers will convince him to back off. Either way, the acute danger should pass. Should, might, the language of uncertainty. And if it doesn't, I asked, then we prepare for a long fight. But David, you can't think about that now. You can only think about getting through the next 24 hours. After we hung up, I lay in the darkness, listening to Grace's breathing, feeling her tension even in silence. Talk to me, I said. Tell me what you're thinking. I'm thinking about a time when I was 7. I fell off my bike, scraped my knee badly. Dad carried me home, cleaned the wound, put on a band-aid with dinosaurs on it. He told me I was brave, that falling was part of learning. Her voice cracked, and I'm trying to reconcile that man, the one who made me feel safe with the man who's stalking me, threatening you, trying to destroy us for telling the truth. Maybe they're both real. Maybe he was capable of love and violence simultaneously. That's what scares me. Because if he could be both, what else could he be? What else is he capable of? I pulled her closer. Whatever happens, we face it together. Okay. No more separation. No more you dealing with your family alone while I deal with my fears alone. We're in this together. Together, she echoed. Even when together feels terrifying, especially then. Wednesday morning arrived with the inevitability of thunder after lightning. I watched the news on my laptop while Grace made coffee. Neither of us would drink. At 7:47 a.m., the story broke. Local businessman Richard Chen arrested on federal fraud charges. The footage showed Richard being led from his home in handcuffs, surrounded by FBI agents and local police. He looked smaller, somehow, diminished, not the imposing figure who'd held court at family dinners and business meetings, just a man in an expensive suit being arrested for crimes he'd committed. Grace stood behind me, watching over my shoulder. I felt her hand on my back, grounding, trembling. "It's real," she whispered. I knew it was coming, but seeing it. Her phone rang. Her mother. Grace stared at the screen, paralyzed. "I can't," she said. "I can't talk to her right now." "Then don't. You don't owe anyone explanations today." The phone rang 3 more times. Then texts started coming from her mother, her aunts, cousins, some angry. "How could you do this to him?" Some confused. "What's happening? Is this really true?" One from a cousin who'd always been kind. "I believe you. I'm here if you need me." Grace turned off her phone. "I can't deal with this. Not today. Maybe not ever." I understood. Sometimes survival meant disconnection. Meant choosing yourself over family expectations. Meant accepting that some relationships couldn't survive truth. By noon, Richard's arrest was everywhere. Local news, business channels, social media buzzing with takes, both sympathetic and damning. His lawyers issued a statement proclaiming innocence, and promising to fight every charge. His PR team worked overtime, spinning the narrative persecution of a successful immigrant, overzealous prosecution, business disputes criminalized by competitors. But under all the spin, the facts remained. Richard Chen had been arrested, charged with multiple federal crimes, released on bond with conditions including the restraining order that kept him away from Grace and me. It was over, or at least the acute phase was over. We'd survived the storm, barely. Battered and changed, but alive. That evening, Grace and I sat on our balcony, watching the sunset. The security cameras hummed in the background, vigilant, protecting the city spread out below us. Millions of people living millions of lives, most of them unmarked by the kind of chaos we'd endured. "I don't know who I am anymore," Grace said quietly. "I used to be someone's daughter, someone's wife, someone's teacher. Now I'm the daughter who betrayed her father, the wife who almost left, the teacher who had to be escorted from her classroom by police. You're also the woman who chose truth over comfort. Who had the courage to turn on her own father when she discovered he was hurting people. Who's stronger than she ever knew she could be. I don't feel strong. I feel destroyed. Destroyed and strong aren't opposites. Grace, sometimes you have to be destroyed before you can be strong. Sometimes breaking is necessary before rebuilding." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Promise me something. Anything. Promise me that no matter what happens next trial, sentencing, whatever comes, we face it together. No more secrets. No more protecting each other from information we need. Just honesty. Complete brutal honesty. I promise. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts." We sat there as the sun disappeared below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red and purple. Beautiful despite everything. Resilient despite destruction, like us, I thought, like we would have to be. Because this wasn't the end. It was barely even the beginning of the end. Richard's trial would take months, maybe years. The fallout would continue. Family fractures, professional consequences, psychological scars that would take time to heal. But we'd survive the worst of it. We'd face the storm and come through damaged but intact. And sometimes survival was enough. Sometimes it was everything. If you've ever made it through the impossible and come out the other side, you know this feeling. Not triumph, not victory, just relief. The profound, exhausting relief of still being standing when you thought you'd fall. We were standing together. Ready for whatever came next. Ready, if not quite whole, but whole enough for now, for today. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But tomorrow could wait. Tonight we had survived and that was enough. 6 months later, I stood in a courthouse hallway watching Richard Chen sign a plea agreement. The trial had been scheduled for 3 weeks. His lawyers had promised a vigorous defense, character witnesses, expert testimony about normal business practices in international trade. But on day 4, facing testimony from 17 defrauded suppliers and forensic accountants who'd unraveled his financial deceptions, Richard's legal team negotiated a deal. Guilty on 4 counts of wire fraud, 3 years federal prison, 5 years probation, Full restitution to victims, his business licenses revoked, Chen Dynamics dissolved, assets liquidated to pay what he owed. It wasn't everything, but it was justice. Imperfect, incomplete, but real. Grace stood beside me, her hand in mine. She hadn't spoken to her father since the arrest. Her mother had cut off all contact, chosen loyalty over acknowledgement. But Grace's aunt, her father's younger sister, had reached out weeks ago. I always suspected, she'd said quietly over coffee. I just didn't want to know. They talked now carefully, building something new from the wreckage of what was. Richard looked smaller in his suit, older. When his eyes met mine across the hallway, there was no rage anymore, just exhaustion. He'd fought and lost, and the fight had taken everything. He looked at Grace last. She didn't flinch, didn't look away, just held his gaze with steady, sad resolve. Then he signed the papers and was led away. We left the courthouse into November sunshine. Grace tilted her face toward the light, eyes closed, breathing deep. "It's over," she said. "The legal part. The rest takes longer." "I know." She opened her eyes. "But I can breathe now. For the first time in 6 months, I can actually breathe." We drove to the coast. Spontaneous, unplanned, just got in the car and drove until the city disappeared behind us and the ocean stretched ahead. We parked at a beach we'd never visited. Walked barefoot in cold sand. Let waves chase us back toward shore. "I got a job offer," I said. "Marketing director for a nonprofit, ethical supply chain advocacy." Ironically enough, they said my experience with corporate fraud cases made me uniquely qualified. Grace laughed, real laughter, the kind I hadn't heard in months. "Only you could turn whistleblowing into a career opportunity. It pays less than consulting, but it feels right. Like maybe everything happened for a reason." "Do you really believe that? That there's a reason for all this pain?" I watched the waves roll in. Persistent and patient. I believe we give it reason. We take what happened and decide what it means. That's the only control we have. She was quiet for a while. "Then I'm pregnant." My heart stopped. "What?" "Found out yesterday. Wasn't sure how to tell you. Wasn't sure if it was good timing or terrible timing." Or I kissed her. Long, deep, tasting salt air and new beginnings. "It's perfect timing," I said when we pulled apart. "Terrifying and perfect. Our child is going to ask about my father someday. About why they never met their grandfather. And we'll tell them the truth. Age-appropriate truth. That sometimes people we love make terrible choices. That loving them doesn't mean accepting those choices. That integrity matters, even when it costs everything." She rested her head on my shoulder. "Think we'll be good parents?" "I think we'll be honest ones." "That's a start." We stayed until sunset, painted the sky in shades of healing gold, bleeding into pink, bleeding into that perfect blue before darkness. The beach emptied around us, but we remained. Two people who'd survived their own unraveling and were slowly, carefully knitting themselves back together. If you've ever emerged from the worst period of your life, you know this feeling. Not happiness yet, that comes later in small doses, relearned gradually, but peace. The bone-deep peace of having survived something that nearly destroyed you. The waves kept coming. Persistent, patient, proof that destruction isn't permanent, that tides recede and return, that nothing stays broken forever if you're willing to do the work of rebuilding. We drove home as stars emerged. Grace's hand rested on her stomach, protective and wondering. My hand covered hers. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, therapy appointments, financial recovery, the slow work of constructing a life from honest foundations. But tomorrow could wait. Tonight we had survived. We had each other. We had truth. Uncomfortable and costly, but ours. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it's everything. The ocean behind us, the future ahead. And between them, us. Scarred, stronger, still standing. Still choosing truth over comfort. Still choosing each other.